Call the regular city council meeting of December 16th, 2020 to order. At 7:25, we had a little bit of AV mix-up, but wanted to make sure that we had public testimony available. So the call-in line will be 424-6248 when we get to sections for public testimony. And if you join me in pledging the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland.
Here.
Tom Baylor.
Here.
Kathy Sherman.
Here.
Jeff Guard.
Here.
Melina Meyer.
Here.
Ann Schaefer.
Here.
David Allison.
Here.
David Gleason.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
So council, if there's no objection, I just want to interject. Lobbyist John Bitney under guest speakers after items A and B is C. We had a chance to meet with the governor this week, and he's had a fair amount of dialogue, and there's been some coalescing of legislative leadership and so forth, so he just wanted to give us a brief update. So approval of agenda with that one addition.
Move
if there's
approve. Second.
Is there any objection to the agenda? That one small modification? Okay, hearing none, the agenda is approved. Does council have any conflicts of interest or ex parte communications to disclose? Hearing none, we have communications by and petitions from visitors. Kristen, do we still have you on the line?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, yeah, the floor is yours under guest speaker items.
Thank you. Thanks, Council. Thanks for persevering with the audio communication for visitors. I wanted to just encourage the Council to direct the manager to submit a comment to the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council in support of Resolution 20D, and I also encourage individuals, if you feel persuaded to comment, I think that would be great also. I'm calling in just as Kristen Carpenter myself, not representing any organization tonight. But having spent 20 years at the Copper River Watershed Project learning about salmon habitat and what makes it successful, it's really all about connectivity. And I think you all know that salmon use very different maps than we do, and that the currents of the Gulf of Alaska influence marine organisms across hundreds of miles. And more specifically, getting this resolution approved, which the Resolution 20D is the one that is advocating for taking an ecosystem approach to awarding trustee council funding instead of looking at a strict line drawn on a map. So more specifically, getting this resolution approved could open the door to more permanent conservation of habitat on the East Copper River Delta. And I think you've all heard about the possibility of retiring the last bit of coal rights in the Bering River drainage, and adopting an ecosystem approach makes it possible for this area to be eligible for EVO's trustee council funding. It's certainly not a given, but it just opens the door to that possibility. So in general, I think it's really great that the trustee council is considering taking an ecosystem approach to how it allocates its funding for habitat conservation, restoration, and research. And in particular, I think it could really benefit the East Copper River Delta. And my understanding is that this approach is really being pushed by Dave Schmid, who, as I think most of you must all know, that he was a fish habitat biologist here with the Forest Service back in the late 90s, and now he is the forest supervisor over the Tongass and the Chugach. And so I think he sees this as a really good thing for fish habitat also. So thank you for considering. I hope you will consider directing the city manager to submit a comment, and that you'll also consider commenting yourselves. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. And we had on the agenda Carol Hoover and Dune Lankard. Are those separate? Or
Well, it was all one.
okay.
I don't know if they.
Okay.
We're
we're both here. I'm actually in one place and he's in another. And greetings to you all. I appreciate this moment. And we also, and I'm speaking for myself and the EAC Preservation Council, endorse this major move to include ecosystem science in their application of restoration decisions. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming through clearly. Thank you. I would ask you to be succinct and brief because we have a whole budget and expect a lot of testimony tonight. So thank you.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, and thank you for all the important decisions you're making tonight. Well, this ecosystem approach will take into account our community, the community of Cordova, the community of the Copper River Delta, and the Bering River ecosystem. And it is a major aspect for them to allow public comment on this. Unfortunately, the public comment is due tonight. And there is a commentinput.com website where people can make their comments by 11:59 this evening. You can go to the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council website. You have to go down and scroll down and find the resolutions, and you will find Resolution D, and your comments are appreciated. There is some politics and people for this and against this, and I would say that the issue is that our Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council is not doing a spend down. They are getting interest in their account, and this is a huge step forward that really respects the people of Cordova and the fishermen and the ecosystem and the salmon and our future. So anyone who wants to ask any questions, even tonight to me, they're very welcome to email to get links to carol@redzone.org. And it's a significant move. Thank you very much. That's my comment.
Thank you. And Dune, are you also on the line?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming through clear. Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you, Council, and happy holidays to everyone. As most of you know me, I'm a local native fisherman, kelp farmer, and conservationist, and I'm also the ED of the local nonprofit, the Native Conservancy. I'm asking the City of Cordova to support Resolution 20D to amend the 1994 Restoration Plan and allow Vivos Trust funding decisions to be made on an ecosystem approach. This is really all about preservation of our wild Copper River salmon. Many times over the years, the City of Cordova has supported efforts to preserve and permanently retire the Bering River coal field. This is our opportunity to get that done. Part of the trustee's mandate, so you know, for restoration is to preserve and protect equivalent thriving habitat to allow impacted resources in the spill zone to recover. This is our collective and best chance to protect the Copper River Delta and bring in potential restoration and research funds and build partnerships to preserve our wild salmon way of life on the Delta. Ensuring the region has a better chance to recover from the Exxon spill will ultimately contribute to healthier communities and a long-term economic prospects with regard to responsible ecological management. To ensure that the EVOS Council supports an ecosystem approach to current and future restoration decisions with the last $150 million in the Restoration Reserve, our Native Conservancy believes it is in the public's best interest that draft resolution 20.20-D be adopted by both the Cordova City Council and the EVOS Trustee Council. As Carol mentioned, you have till midnight to testify on the Trustee Council website. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before we get into public, incident management team. Got ahead of myself on the agenda. Do we have an incident management team report?
Dr. Sanders, are you online?
I am.
Oh, fantastic.
Great, hi. So we currently have 4 active cases, and we received our first shipment of vaccination today. We're following state guidelines in terms of the COVID vaccination to get healthcare workers, emergency responders, and long-term care vaccinated. That seems to be going well. Across the country, it seems to be going well. We did have the first incident in our country happened in Juneau. We had one person had an allergic reaction to an immunization yesterday, responded well, have recovered, and have been discharged. We feel very confident in this vaccine that we are going to be able to roll it out in a safe manner here in Cordova. This is something that Cordova has done an excellent job in terms of emergency preparedness and preparing in previous events, including the H1N1 pandemic, to have vaccination pause, be ready to roll it out to the community. We are waiting state guidance and state distribution of vaccine to be ready for that community distribution, but expect that to be happening over the next couple of months. I know there has been some community questions. There is absolutely no vaccine mandate, but we are excited to have a tool to be able to help improve our community safety and move forward getting back to normal. I'm open to questions if anybody has any.
Questions, council? Thank you, Dr. Sanders. And I just want to underscore that Cordova was among the handful of the communities to receive this first. And again, I think that's an endorsement of the whole community, really, but particularly Dr. Sanders, the emergency management team, and city staff, because we just built that relationship with the state. They want this vaccination to be successful and to be administered properly. So just another good reflection on our team and community. So thank you, Dr. Sanders.
Thank you.
Okay, and next is lobbyist John Bitney. John?
Mayor, can you hear me okay?
We hear you very well. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I will just try to get right to it here. In terms of just a legislative report, typically by now, the Senate and House would have announced their organizations following the certification of the election, which would mean we would know who's in the leadership positions, such as the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, or the Finance Chair. But that hasn't happened yet. This year's election produced almost even splits between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans have a slim majority in numbers. There's 21 Republicans in the House and 13 in the Senate, but Republicans are also internally divided with some pretty strong divisions. Whereas on the other hand, the Democrats may have slightly fewer numbers, but they're a lot more cohesive group that's sticking together as a bloc. Why this is important is that it indicates that the dynamics in the legislature that we're going to see next session is that it will stay close to what we've seen pretty much over the last 2 years, where the majority of votes on the floor in both the House and the Senate are comprised of more moderate Republicans teaming up with Democrats when it comes to the major policy issues on the table, such as, the budget. The biggest difference going into this next session is the approach to the budget that's coming from Governor Dunleavy and his administration, and we saw that in the budget they released last Friday. He's still prioritizing PFD payments and budget reductions, but overall we're not seeing things that we saw previously, such as completely shutting down the Marine Highway or eliminating power cost equalization, shared fishery tax, and things of that magnitude. And also, I think important for you folks is rather than zeroing out school bond debt reimbursement, he's proposed a 50% funding level for FY22. Governor has also been very supportive of funding for Cordova's Tier 1 grant for the harbor. At the beginning of this year, he put forward a $5.5 million request to the legislature for the harbor, but due to COVID, the legislature shortened the session in March. They only partially funded the capital budget. They didn't include the governor's money that he requested for the harbor, and then the legislature told us that they were going to take up the rest of those capital budget items in special session for sometime this year. Obviously, that didn't happen. But in the past couple of weeks, both Mayor Copeland and myself have been communicating with the governor's office to make sure that try to see that we can get that Cordova Harbor project put back in front of the legislature again next session. I want to defer to the mayor about conveying his conversations, but my communications with the DOT Deputy Commissioner Rob Carpenter, Legislative Director Miles Baker, and Deputy Chief of Staff Aikis Giolopoulos clearly indicate that Cordova's harbor is foremost on their radar, and I really want to underscore that. I was impressed with each of their depth of knowledge about the situation in the harbor and its priority. What the governor's budget included for the capital budget was, and mainly for in this case harbors, is he's got a $350 million state bond package for transportation projects. He did not specify any projects within that $350 million. He's left that up to the legislature to discuss and allocate. It would have been nice to see Cordova specifically mentioned again. But I think the key here is that the Department of Transportation and his office have ranked Cordova in their listing of statewide harbor projects as the #1 project in the state. So in other words, if the governor's bond package can move forward, Cordova's harbor is the first in line. So what does all this mean? I guess Mayor and Council, I'm more optimistic about the harbor going into this session than I've been in I think ever before. Given that the legislature is one that is going to pretty much be very similar in terms of its decision making that we've seen in the past, trying to moderate budget reductions and balance things out with perhaps paying lower PFDs than the statutory amount, and maintaining some semblance of overall state services for education, the Marine Highway, and all those sorts of things. That we've got a group of legislators, I think, that we can work with that can come up with a package in working with the governor. But the thing to keep in mind is the governor is very much in this picture. With these close partisan splits in Juneau, he's still going to have the final say on any budget that they pass because he's got his veto pen. Therefore, they're going to be forced to negotiate with him any final decisions. And that's why the approach, I think, that he's shown here on the budget on last Friday is what's so critical and important, I think, for some of your considerations as you look at your own budget and what we're going to be facing next session. I can go into a lot of details, but I know your time is short and you have a lot to cover. So I will stop there. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you for the time and happy holidays.
Questions, Council? So, John, if I'm curious, if you were a betting man and was to put a percentage on the odds of getting funding for the Cordova Harbor, the way the picture sits right now, what would you say?
I would say, if I was a betting man, I would bet that it's going to get funded. And the reason I say that is because our state's in an economic situation where the legislature is going to be under a tremendous amount of pressure to put a bond package out there to get things going. They have not had a capital budget for years. And just the job and employment situation in the state, there is going to be a tremendous amount of political pressure for them to do something. And a bond package puts a lot of money on the street and takes care of a lot of projects, such as the harbor, that have begun to be part of a growing backlog. And I would add, too, that there was also another bond package the governor put forward of another $100 million using AHFC general obligation bonds for more transportation projects and water and sewer projects. So I just mentioned that because he's put a lot of funding on the table for them to allocate. So being that we are at the top of the list, he specifically mentioned that the bond packages for transportation and harbors, I think we're in a very strong position.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I kind of estimated just a 75% chance we'd get funding this year, so I just wanted to share that. Any questions, Council? Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, I was just curious, and this might not even be in your area, but what is not really about the budget, but what do you think is going to happen to the drift fleet in Cook Inlet with what's going on with closing fishing in federal waters? And do you think that that's going to stick just to Cook Inlet, or is it going to come to other areas?
I am not a good person to answer your question. I've followed that issue. I understand your question. It's certain I did not expect it to go the way it did. It's just, I don't think that issue is over. I think that my understanding, sir, is that it came down to the state not willing to take over management. And that to me doesn't seem as a policy decision that the state is going to be able to stand behind for an indefinite period of time.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions from council online?
Yeah, this is Councilman Schaefer.
Councilman Schaefer.
Hi, yeah, sort of the same question about harbor funding is about that 50% school bond debt reimbursement. How confident do you feel that that will make it through the legislature?
In over the last 2 years, the final number on school bond debt reimbursement was for the current year we're in, it's obviously zero. The legislature funded it at 100%. The governor line item vetoed it to zero. A year ago, if you will, he had proposed zero as well. They funded it at 100%, and he vetoed it back to 50%. So in order for, my point is that the legislature in each of the last 2 years has funded it coming out of the session at 100%, and the final number has been the result of the governor's veto pen. So for him to come in and stake a 50% position, I think, is a bottom line number.
Other questions, council?
Yeah, this is Councilmember Meyer.
Councilman Meyer.
I have a question about the harbor bond, kind of as it relates to the school bond. Is there any chance that if we got approved, that the school or that the harbor bond would be 100% funding? Are we going to run into problems like we are with the school bonds, that we putting together a package for cities to take out bonds? We take out a bond, and then the state deciding to veto it or not put it in the budget to fund our bond, because we'll be taking out the bond.
No, it is not an annual appropriation. This would be whatever funding you get is you get it all from the state, if you will, in one upfront total payment. Now, granted, that payment needs to be matched by the city on a one-to-one basis, but it's not like they won't have the ability as the years go by to pull back their obligation. Whatever funding is approved is the 100% funding that you would get up front.
Yeah, the state actually holds that bond, Melina, so they're fiscally responsible for it. We hold the school bond, and the state just promised that they would reimburse us for half of that, or for their part of it, so.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to double check since we're running the school bond problem.
Good question.
Yeah. Other questions, council? Okay, thank you, Benny. I think this is very timely and really, really important for the city council tonight as they contemplate the budget. So, some important pieces in there. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. God bless.
Okay, so I hear the phone ringing, but I'll just repeat that for public testimony, the telephone call-in number is 424-6248, and we'll go to those calls now.
Is there one?
So we're taking audience comments regarding agenda items. And if you're watching on YouTube, that number again is 424-6248.
So there are none here, so we can take a minute.
Are there any comments from the audience? Okay. You can just state your name and residence for the record, please. Thank you.
Hi, Mike Hicks, Box 674, Cordova, Alaska. And, I just want to thank you for all you've been doing on the budget. It's been a tough year. I just don't want to come across as adversarial. I'm very passionate about the police department. I'm trying to be helpful. And I just wanted to let the folks that are the council that is on the phone know that your entire police department is here in the audience tonight in support of this. So thank you.
Who's watching the town?
Watching it from here.
Thank you. That call-in number again, 424-6248. Is there other public testimony from the audience regarding agenda items?
So this is for Jewel. I'm on a different line. Is it okay to do public testimony from this line?
Yes.
Thank you. So Barb Rule, mile 2.2 Whiteshed Road, testifying as both citizen and school board chair. And again, thank you so much for all the work at the end of the year, and I've been reflecting a great deal on 2020 and the challenges it's presented and the opportunities, but honestly, mostly challenges. And I'm very grateful that the City Council has continued to meet and continue to address all the things that face our community in light of the current circumstances. Mr. Whitney did talk about the fact that the school bond debt reimbursement is in the governor's budget, which is something that I was hoping to bring to your attention, but he already has. I would hope that, given that the governor is proposing that, and as he mentioned, the legislature has voted for full funding, that would give you some confidence that there will be dollars there for school bond debt reimbursement. Again, with the idea of you being able to perhaps more fully fund the requests that you received in terms of the budget, both for the school board, the school district, the students, and other departments. I wish you well in your decisions, but again, urge you to think about the fact that we are in a more emergency situation than usual, and we do have funds available to us to help us solve it. And I would like to see us, both as a citizen and the school board chair, use those funds to support and stabilize our community. Thank you again for all your hard work.
Thank you. Do we have any other calls, Harmony? Okay. I want to thank Harmony for coming in on kind of short notice to help cover tonight, so thank you. So we don't have any other calls, no other public testimony from the audience regarding agenda items? Okay, we'll move on to chairpersons and representatives of boards and commissions. CCMC Authority Board.
Greg, well, I don't know if you can, okay, take it off.
Thank you.
Greg Meyer, CCMC Board Chair, and thanks for having us. Well, it's kind of been a bittersweet 2020, to say the least. Bitter, obviously, is COVID. There's been actually a lot of sweets for the CCMC, and I think for the community's benefit from CCMC and the relationship with NVE and Alanka, getting the test machines and getting all the testing done, and that working relationship's been really good, and that's, I think, something we can all be proud of and thankful for, frankly. And you know, I've been on the board for a couple of years, a year and a half, whatever, but really been trying to dig into the financial woes of the facility, and believe it or not, there's a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel, and I think we're really starting to see it. We've got some good leadership in Dr. Sanders, and Eric Price, our new CFO, is doing an incredible job and has uncovered some really good eye-opening stuff that hopefully I can present to you guys in January, February, when we get everyone gets a little break, and we can kind of line out what we've been doing and what improvements we're making and what we're finding, and kind of give you guys a kind of a path of the future on our own and with NVE if that happens. So anyway, and I'm going to let Eric present the budget to you. He's here, and just wanted to say a couple things. And the other sweet aspects, one of the big bonuses, we got Dr. Sanders back this year, and hopefully she'll renew. She's talking about it, so that's a real bright spot, and she's been invaluable in this COVID thing, and just for the morale at CCMC and her leadership. I mean, we can't thank her enough. I really appreciate having her and Eric. Can you guys hear me okay?
Can you hear online okay, Council?
You bet. Yep, I hear you fine. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. And so another sweet spot, obviously, this year is the CCMC's got quite a few COVID funds, and the board's approved a couple $1 million worth of improvements to the facility, and let me tell you, much needed improvements with the HVAC system and the nurse call system and the digital x-ray system, and just on and on and on. And you know, it's been we've needed those repairs, maintenance, and improvements in equipment and facility for years, and we just haven't had the money. So, we've got a little leg up, and the board's approved the funds, and Dr. Sanders and Eric and the staff has done a great job of getting us equipment and seeing those improvements through. So. So our financial request this year is minimal, and it's not for operations. We think we can get through the year just fine without any operational financial assistance from the city. But we are requesting funds to replace our underground fuel tank, and we got bids at about $350,000. And so we're asking for $300,000 from the city to replace that tank. It's the non-COVID thing, so our funds are limited for that. So, but we're willing to kick in $50,000 if you guys can help with the rest, and we'd really appreciate that. We've got notice from our insurance company that they don't want to insure us anymore, but they reluctantly did. They raised our deductible from $50,000 to $250,000 and increased our premium. So. Kind of a priority, I think, for all of us to get that taken care of, and a huge liability. That tank's been underground there for 30-some years since the hospital was built, and it's passed all this pressure testing, and we don't have to see any leaks. But insurance-wise, they're not going to insure us, so we got to get that replaced one way or another. So I think that's high on our priority list, and we got bids out, and hopefully this summer we'll get that replaced, or sometime this spring get started. So. So our 2021 budget shows a $955,000 loss, but what is it? 800 and some thousand is depreciation. So actually a cash loss of about 175,000. So we should be able to cover that. Eric and Dr. Sanders are doing some good things with increasing the revenue and saving some expenses. So I think that budget should be pretty good, but who knows? After this year, anything can happen. But I think we're starting to see some improvement. And then we've cleared up over about $1 million in net receivables and about $1 million in payables this year. So we're getting there slowly but surely. My non-financial request from the city and the community is to please use our hospital a little bit more. We need the revenue. We need the traffic flow. 87% of our the claims, since the city is self-insured, 87% of the claims have gone outside. We've only got 13% of the claims at our hospital. So if the employees and the citizens could use the hospital more, it sure would help a lot. Maybe be our first choice, and then if you have to go on, make that decision yourself. But sure would help the hospital out if you can use them the most you can. And so I'll introduce Eric Price, our CFO. He's got lots of medical billing and accounting background, and within the first month he was here, he found a lot of issues with what was going on, and a major one was back when we changed the name of the hospital from Cordova Community Hospital to Cordova Community Medical Center. That created havoc with billings, and it's more than just the name. There's a lot of back issues, and we can explain that January, February when we come back. But we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars we've left on the table for years, and it's a big deal. And the federal government moves slow to correct these things, but Dr. Sanders and Eric put a request in June to fix the problem. But and Eric has encountered this at other hospitals, and it's taken about 18 months to get corrected. So we're hoping, it will get corrected, and we will see some major revenue, net revenue coming back to us. So, but we just have to be patient and get that through. But he's done a lot with getting billing back in-house. We're paying over $20,000 a month to have a billing company do our billing, and doing a terrible job at it. So hopefully the community's seeing some results from that and are happy about it. And if there's still issues, just give us a call and tell us what your issues are. We really are trying to tackle the revenue billing cycle and our billings and collectibles and contracts, and Eric's doing a great job. So, and before I turn it over to him, I'd like to thank you guys, especially for all the thankless work you do. It's a tough position to be in, and I appreciate it. And also want to thank Alanka and CCMC staff for the great job they did this year. And it was quite a task, and they did a really good job. And I'd like to thank the donors. When this COVID thing happened last spring, we made phone calls, and the EAC Corporation just got their checkbook out and wrote a $200,000 check. The Alaska Community Foundation wrote us a $100,000 check for a new wheelchair van, which was desperately needed. Copper River Seafoods donated $20,000. Rod World, who is the CEO of EAC Corporation, wrote a $10,000 check to us. So, and then we've got all this federal money and state money, but I would just wanted to give a shout out to those folks, because when we were flat broke and really needed, masks and gloves, and they just opened their checkbook and wrote a check. So I appreciate that. And my last thing is Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and hopefully a better 2021. This is our CCMC CFO extraordinaire, Eric Price.
Thank you, Greg. Members of the council, Mayor Copeland, thank you for having me here. The budget we put together for fiscal year 21, we did during our review with the board, did point out that in fact we are showing a net loss for the year. And we want to give a clear picture of what we are experiencing and not pad the budget with any sort of inflated numbers. One thing that we have been discussing and really investigating is how can we improve quality overall, not just around financial operations, but over all the service delivery, et cetera. And there's been a lot of great work being done by the directors of the different departments. And if you look at the budget, one thing we are looking at increasing is our pharmaceutical kind of saturation or reach within the area. We have a new pharmacist starting in March, and we intend to improve some of the services around there, expand, I guess I should say. We are also looking at how we can improve our swing bed days. For the critical access hospital, that's one of our major areas of opportunity to improve our revenues. And in the fiscal year 20 budget, there was a high number of swing beds anticipated, but with the COVID-19 pandemic, that was a shortfall we just couldn't have seen or avoided. So we amended our numbers a bit for fiscal year 21 to allow for that to be a more realistic reach goal for the next coming year. As Greg mentioned, one of the challenges we have are some of those costs, deferred maintenance costs, that we are not able to cover with COVID funding or CARES funding. We looked really hard at different options of how we can improve the overall facility and future preparedness for any sort of respiratory illness or any sort of medical pandemic that may happen in the future. We feel fairly confident that the facility is moving in the direction where we are prepared, but there's certain things we just can't allocate the funds to, and I think that's what we're asking is to help us with that, that underground storage tank. And as Greg mentioned, we are really looking to improve the quality and the availability of our services, and would ask that the community, consider CCMC as a member of the community and look at us as an opportunity for healthcare delivery. Certainly, we are improving how we bill for patient services, and starting in January, we will have a much more robust sliding fee scale available to help offset the high cost of deductibles. We're evaluating our pricing to make sure that it's fair and consistent with the region, and we're also making sure that we have a more timely filing of your claims so they can return easily. And we have a new staff member, a patient account specialist, who will be there to help with any sort of charity care write-off or any adjustments you may need. So please reach out to us if you have any questions on your bills or any medical needs. That's what I have for you. Any questions from the council, Mayor Copeland?
Any questions, council? Councilman Baylor?
Yeah, I guess I do have more of a comment and question, and I don't know if there's any, you could even address it, or Mr. Meyer, and you don't have to, but I know for quite a long time, along with the billing, we've been sending out money to out-of-town work. And I think we've had an employee that lives back east that we've been sending a good paycheck to, and I'm sure there's somebody here that could fill that job. So that was one of those sticking points with me with okaying these budgets, is like, wait a minute, why aren't we employing people that live here in town? So I don't know if that's something you've addressed or are aware of, but it should be taken care of.
Yeah, if I may, as we looked at we looked really hard at the professional services we're paying outside, and not just for any single employee, but just as a group, nursing costs, physicians. And Dr. Sanders has put a very concerted effort into bringing as much in-house into the city of Cordova as possible. Some of the barriers that existed prior was this concept of, if we increase our FTE count or bring people in-house, what's that going to do to our PERS liability? And we've done a real deep analysis of that, make sure that cost isn't going to be prohibitive. And we've identified that by bringing FTEs in-house, especially the service providers, that require that face-to-face interaction, you get to know your doctor, get to know your care provider. That's part of the quality we talked about, and having that in-house. There is an economic return on that if we have the employee here on site, and they build put the roots here in Cordova. That is funded money that will be circulated within the economy locally, rather than going outside other areas. We do, though, still have some positions that are able to work remotely, and that's a concern that we've heard. And we want to make sure that we are providing the best service and availability of that individual, or any individual who's working remote, to provide the service to help the community as needed. To answer your question, Councilman Bailey?
Well, let's just say I hope that position comes back to Cordova.
Yeah, I've been on for a couple of years. It's been mentioned to two different CEOs, and kind of let them do what they think is best. And it's been brought up a number of times. So yeah. Anyway,
thank you.
Other questions, council?
This is Councilman Meyer.
Councilman Meyer?
I'm sure it's in this budget, but just because we did have to draw from our permanent fund not too long ago for back PERS, I just want to make sure the back PERS are being covered in this budget.
Yes, we have actually set aside a cash reserve of $1 million to take in fiscal year 21 to offset that need to ask for funding from the city council and from the rainy day fund. And that was the question, I believe. I didn't hear one of the words. Councilman Meyer, could you repeat that? There's a word about
PERS.
Oh, the back PERS.
Yes.
Yes. Yep, we've done an analysis on that. That's been caught up. And in fact, as I was talking to Mr. Meyer here prior to the meeting, we are at a point now where we've caught up the liabilities across the board, not just the PERS, but all accounts payable. I think last December we had like 1.9 million in accounts payable back due. This morning we're around maybe 150,000 as of December 15th. So we've worked really hard to capture that and not find ourselves in that negative margin type situation. But with the PERS, we're also looking at, we are getting some rebates, and there is some of the state-sponsored on-behalf funding that's offsetting some of that cost. And so the budget as presented is representative of our current PERS spend. We believe that we should be able to cover that for fiscal year 21 without need for assistance from the council.
Thank you.
and we're being cautious about our spending on the PERS money. So we just let you know that PERS is being taken care of. It's asked often, because I asked the question when I first got on and got an answer that wasn't wasn't correct. So we are watching that carefully, and we're watching how we're spending our COVID money. So doing the best we can.
Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, I was just curious, when that tank gets removed, will your insurance go back down?
Councilman Gleason, yes. We believe that there'll be a reduction of the cost. That was one of the points we brought up this last year with our insurance provider. In fact, we had to shop around a bit to get a comparable rate. Only one insurance carrier was willing to participate in that liability. And so we do anticipate the rate will go down annually, but the biggest piece will be the liability of a high cost deductible plan if it does, something catastrophic does happen.
And it is a very hard market right now with California fires and everything, just in general. Insurance market's pretty hard. Other questions online, council?
Councilman Sherman, comment?
Councilman Sherman.
Sure, really lots of good information and welcome CFO Price. It was great to hear some of your comments that backbilling and accounts receivables has been a pain for a long time, so I'm really happy to hear about that. And I would just say kudos all around. I'm thrilled to have Dr. Sanders around. I now welcome Dr. Price, or CFO Price. And thanks for all these things you're working towards clearing up, because they've been on the docket for a long time. So maybe if we can all do this together, things are going to be brighter. So thank you.
You're welcome, Councilman Sherman. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Other questions, comments, council? Okay, Greg, Eric, thank you very much. School board.
Good evening, Alex Russin, Superintendent of Schools. So we're in the final day of the first semester of school for the 2020-21 school year. And while things haven't been ideal for any of us in the community, and certainly not our students, we're real happy with how the first semester progressed. We're probably one of the few school districts, albeit a small one, that have been in-person learning with any type of continuity and consistency throughout the first semester. So that in large part, I think we have the community to thank. We have the parents, we have council, and every single member of the community who have from the get-go taken on doing some uncomfortable things, and maybe even some things that they didn't want to do, like wearing masks. And washing hands and maintaining physical distance. But it really does take a community, a collective effort to make these things happen. And I can't see us progressing the way that we did moving forward in our plan from the start. When I hear other students around the state talking about being online in school for 6 hours a day, I just can't imagine any of our kids sitting and looking at a computer for that amount of time, no matter how engaging teachers might make lessons for them. And so again, extremely appreciative of the efforts that our community has made and the support that really everybody has rallied around for our school district. That being said, we will be starting online for 2 weeks after the holiday break. So January 4th, students will be online through I think it's the 15th, that Friday the 15th. And again, just a little bit of caution and precaution, as the holiday has many people traveling and people coming in and out of the community. We don't want to do anything that might put us in a situation where we're having to go remote for extended periods of time throughout the second semester. Again, that said, we have found it extremely difficult this year to find substitute teachers for whatever reason. People are making personal choices and maybe even smart ones to stay at home and maybe not be quite as engaged as they normally would. So if people are interested in helping out at the school, they can come by our office, our district office, and learn more about opportunities for subbing or volunteering even. Let's see, Toys for Tots. For the past 4 or 5 years or so, we have been partnering with Toys for Tots to provide a toy to every child under the age of 18 in our community. And unfortunately, Toys for Tots is experiencing both a national and a state wide, I guess, lack of toys to be distributed in communities. They did surprise us and send us a number of boxes several weeks ago, not upon our request, but it just kind of showed up in the mail, so to speak. And so those are more geared toward our elementary age students, and unfortunately not so for our middle and high school students. So a toy will be gifted to each student tomorrow, our last day in session before the break. And then the public can come by to our district office if they have any kids who are being homeschooled or children that are below school age, and they can pick out a gift. So Santa was not available for our gathering as we have done the past few years to congregate at Mount Eccles. So that's a little bit different. Let's see what else. I think that's about it for now. Pardon?
Red Cross toys?
Red Cross, Toys for Tots.
Oh, is that what that was? Okay,
Toys for
great.
Tots, right. Oh, I wanted to mention the HVAC system. So that's nearing completion at the high school. So we're excited about that. I've got a small crew that have done all of the mechanical work in the classrooms and in the shop area. And they'll be moving to the boiler room sort of as the last stage in the project, and then bringing things online from there. So again, we're excited about that opportunity, and we'll even have plans to video the training that the contractors will provide, so that we can have that historically if we need to go back and look at that for any new personnel that we might need to have and so forth. So I'm happy to take any questions or listen to any comments you might have.
Council, questions, comments? Helen?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, do you want to speak to the recent grant you guys got? I think you're sharing with the hospital. It's good news.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if I've mentioned it in the past, but we received from the U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Utility Services grant in the amount of $600,000. And it has to do with distance delivery and telemedicine grant. So we are in the process of spending federal dollars upgrading our technology equipment, not only for the classroom, but for the individual devices that students use. And we are in the early sort of brainstorming stages with Alanka and CCMC to talk about the purchase of telemedicine equipment that's mobile, that could be shared with both the clinic and the hospital to do any care outside of the clinic setting, and working with the Prince William Sound College as well in terms of building the existing CNA program that they have there to increase opportunities for our students to really start down a health medical pathway should they choose or find interest in that. We are looking for partners to match our shared contribution, by the way, of $89,000. So.
Questions, council? Okay, thank you, Alex. Okay, and then we had an RCAC link in the packet, so. And there's a link to that. And then the draft budget from CCMC Authority Board and a student council representative report. Any comments on any of those items, council? Okay, hearing none. Approval of the consent calendar. Any will to set any of those items aside?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Allison?
I don't want to set it aside, but just to point out a typo or a clerical thing, the date on the resolution on page 12 says January, it should say December 2020.
I can do that without a formal
Okay, yeah,
amendment.
yeah. So just a clerical correction there. Anything else, council? Hearing none, a roll call vote with that one minor clerical correction.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes?
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Tom Baylor.
Yes.
The consent calendar is approved.
Okay, thank you. And so the minutes were in that consent calendar, and we don't have any considerations of bids tonight. So on the mayor's report, I do have a couple items, but I feel like they provide a little context for the budget. So normally I would have preferred to have that written, but the first item is just, and this is especially Councilman Sherman, I hadn't had a chance to touch base with you, but is historical chair. We had a prospectus and a kind of a proposal for a Cordova Air Museum several years ago. Especially Martin Moe, the chamber director, was really working on that, but there's a 1930 Balanca plane, one of the original Cordova airplanes. It's been restored to museum quality by the owner, and they're willing to place that in Cordova in an air museum. Then we have that 1939 original Cordova Air hangar still on Eac Lake in Ken Smith and others. So there's a lot of external momentum to help Cordova build an air museum, and we have that prospectus. So this is a hard copy for you, Helen, and then I have another one. But I just want to mention that because it's just an opportunity going forward. And then I did want to hit on some of the governor's talking points, and appreciate Bittany setting that up. He hand-delivered our letter before the budget was actually finally formulated, and then I had a chance to set up a phone call on yesterday morning. And just thank the governor for their support through the pandemic. That's been showing up in a lot of ways, and you've kind of touched some of the reimbursements that we've got. Some of those were, I would say, semi-discretionary by the state. And again, our whole community really working together, and our medical team has put us in a position to have the state's confidence and support through the pandemic. Thanked them for the fisheries, especially the crab fisheries, king crab and tanner crab that we really haven't seen in Prince William Sound for a long time. And for the commissioner's support for kind of setting forward Prince William Sound as a center for excellence for the science around mariculture and aquaculture opportunities in the state. And also, we talked a little bit about the disaster declarations and the governor's support for those, and some of the economic downturn we've had with our, again, our 45% reduction in our fisheries. So those support for those disaster declarations. Thanked him for the limited ferry service we've had this winter, and noted that ferry's been full, and we can do that with a regional ferry if we get that right. So I'm going to continue that conversation. This has been mentioned 2 or 3 times, worth repeating that school bond debt reimbursement is in the governor's budget. Very unlikely he's going to veto his own budget. So I would say we can pretty well bank on that, and that has a very large budget impact, I think. Again, the harbor, Tier 1 harbor renovation match program, we're well positioned for that. And the last 2 items, well, so we just continued to, we can support that bond proposal. That's a state bond, so we need that to pass, but that puts us in a good place then. And then also requested the governor to visit Cordova. Around the talk around fisheries, he did ask for a 1-pager from us on how we can maybe look at some management changes in the overall management approach for small fisheries to make them a little more accessible. And then another way of saying that is convert these test fisheries into real and ongoing fisheries. The reason we got those is CDFU's work, Chelsea and McKenna, the shellfish chair, putting in the proposals with the Board of Fish like the commissioner requested. So I want to give them credit where it's due, and they're going to be helping, if not outright drafting most of that 1-pager for us. So I'm hoping to get that turned around here in the next few days. Just a reminder that 2nd Street upgrade project, thanks to city staff's work on putting that together, was approved as of October 1st in the budget. So engineering work can commence on that. And that's a fairly large project, I think $8 million overall. So just to kind of set the stage for that a $10 million harbor project, an $8 million roads project, those have pretty big economic impacts through our hotel, lodging, Main Street, and our businesses. So I see a little bit of blue sky on the horizon there. So just wanted to mention those items. Then just a reminder, friendly reminder, just a mention in an email circulated to council that, in terms of looking and making modifications on the agenda, that the agenda is set by the mayor and a manager. So if council have things you want on the agenda, either two councilmen can bring those forward or bring those through the manager and the mayor, and also for the public's benefit. So that's all I had, except appreciate Susan working and helping me to work on updating the committees. And I really appreciate, again, all the volunteers that volunteer for our boards and commissions. We had a lot more applicants this year than we had available openings, and some who were incumbents on one board or commission volunteered to fill the one that we really have had a challenge with, which is planning and zoning. And we have two real long tenured volunteers there with Scott Pagan and Tom McGann. So we appreciate their years of service there, but that's a lot of experience. So you see an updated list in front of you that includes Trey Losey, who has served and has reapplied. Sarah Tremblay, I really appreciate her willingness to re-request to be on P&Z rather than the library board, where she would have been an incumbent, and where we had more applicants. So Arissa Pearson and Krista Williams volunteered for that. Dave Zastro, again, is a great U.S. Forest Service connection and has served on that for quite some time and has really partnered with Parks and Rec too. Recommend reappointment there. Jim Casement was the only applicant for the only vacant position on the historical preservation, has done great there, so recommending that. And then on Harbor Commission, again, we had 4 applicants, and Max Weiss and Mike Babick were the incumbents, but I recommend those because they've been there for quite some time, and there is a kind of a history, especially with the harbor upgrades and whatnot, and wanted to maintain some continuity. But appreciate the other applicants for those. So that's all I had, unless there's any questions. Councilman Gleason.
That crab fishery, that test fishery, does the department taking the money from that?
No, so that was a bid by processors, and our local processor, 60 Degrees North, bid on it as the processor, and they got the bid. So they made a bid to the Department of Fish and Game. They got whatever they bid, the Fish and Game got a share of it.
Okay.
But the rest went, to the processor and fleet. And I think I understand it was a pretty large percentage. So it was a meaningful test fishery. Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, so with the harbor, we're losing Whitney as our lobbyist, right? We don't have funding for that this year. How important is Whitney into bringing that grant home to us? And if there's 2 questions here, and if it's important, then what about the harbor funding it? If that's the main goal of, that's the big push, does the harbor have the funds to maybe contract with Mr. Bitney and work on that harbor project for us?
I'm going to let the manager speak to that.
So one of the things that we agreed to do, I agreed with Bitney, was if the governor puts the $5 million in the harbor fund for our project, then we would want him to drive that project home. The governor did something a little different. He said, I'm going to put money into a bond to drive that project home. Kind of the same difference. So indeed, we do need Bitney, and indeed, the harbor is going to pay for it because it is for their project. So that will be negotiated with Bitney. It'll be a smaller contract because he will be doing very specific work just for the harbor project. It'll be time limited. It'll be through when the legislative session ends or when the bond is put forward. So yes, to answer your question,
Okay.
and they've agreed to do that, and Bitney's agreed to a reduced contract, and will focus on the harbor.
Okay, good. That was something. And then, so what is the 50% for FYI 2022 on the school funding, school bond? That's when we can expect, nothing in 2021, 2022 is what we're saying.
It's the state's 22 budget begins July 1 of 2021 and ends June 30th of 2022. So when he suggested that, it will be, should be received. It's a reimbursement process. If the legislature approves it, we will get 50%, approximately $460,000, probably in fourth quarter of 2021 for repayment of the bond debt that we will have made a payment for. They reimburse that.
So that's affecting this budget tonight then.
We have not put it in this budget because this went out before the governor's budget was, but that is resources that's new to the table.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that clarification.
Then just for my part, for the advocacy, I think I felt like, and I'm just reflecting, I guess council kind of said this too, I think we had a low percentage chance, maybe less than a 25% chance at that harbor. And I think that letter and Bitney's direct engagement really helped push us into a good spot, so. Any other questions for me, council? Okay, manager's report.
So I'm not going to talk about COVID right now. I'm going to talk about landslides. Is Leif here? I don't see him. So as you all probably are well aware, Haines had a devastating landslide, unexpected landslide in their community that killed 3 people. And for all of us who are in coastal communities with mountains surrounding us, I think it brought the question to bear, what do we know about our local risks for landslides? Leif, I asked Leif if he would investigate that, and he did indeed chat with someone at the state. And they are going to bring resources to our community, as they will to other coastal mountainous communities that could potentially be at risk for landslides. So I just want to reassure community that we are indeed having that conversation. We've identified some assistance at no cost at this point in time to us, and we'll keep moving that forward. So just wanted to share that with you. I don't know why I did this, but I offered to be chair of the Prince William Sound Economic Development District. So I will be in a position to help set the agenda. So if at any point in time the community is interested in finding out what is happening around the sound, or if there are issues that bubble up that need to be brought into a larger collective conversation, please reach out to me, and I'll make sure that gets added. And as you all know, Kristen Carpenter is the executive director of that organization, and she now has an office here in Cordova for this organization for the first time ever. So we're very excited by that. And another staff person was just hired here. So I feel like we've brought some good resources to bear in our community. I want to send out a really big thank you to everyone who's helped with city's COVID response over the last 9 months. Hard to believe. I want to thank CCMC staff, the Alanka clinic staff, and the dynamic team that we have here at City Hall. Everyone worked very, 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 very hard, and I think the results that we're seeing here in Cordova is a result of everyone's good work. And with that, I also want to draw attention to Cindy Appleton, who is actually sitting here in the audience with us. She is retiring at the end of this month, and probably this will be the last meeting that we see her sitting here as a city employee. And I hope all of you will join me in a round of applause. Yes. So thank you, Cindy, for your long service. I think, 14, 15 years has it been? Almost 15 years. Yeah. Yeah. So with that, I want to also share that because the harbor is such a critical project to our community and our economic success here, staff here is really looking at other fund sources, and we've identified some grant opportunities with EDA, Economic Development Administration, federal, and NOAA. It has a program to help with some consultation to get our project ready for federal funding. So we are looking at other possibilities that will only increase the pot that could possibly come to bear to get that project off the ground. And then finally, I have been the subject of a bit of derision in the community this last week over the budget process and the proposed budget that is in front of everyone now. I think we all know it's been an extraordinary year, and there's been extraordinary repercussions that we're all having to deal with as we head into 2021. So I wanted to do a really brief overview for those of you who are concerned about my logic around the budget and the conversations that council has been having. The budget was developed with the assumption that we've got a $1.5 million budget problem. Raw fish taxes down, sales use taxes down, bond debt was eliminated. Now we've got it back. Yahoo. COVID CARES relief from the federal government is unknown, and if anyone's following the conversation, Mitch McConnell basically just said city, state, and tribal assistance will be off the table until the new administration comes in. So I'm fairly confident that there'll be some additional relief coming, but we don't know how much. Another piece was we want to retain existing services and keep our existing staff. No layoffs, no tax increases. How can we do that? And ultimately, we wanted to plan not only for a balanced 2021 budget, but look forward to the costs and the impacts of a 2022 and beyond budget. So how do we become sustainable and support the community's needs at the same time? It's not an easy task. So we looked at temporary solutions, hiring freeze, not filling vacant positions, which includes Cindy's position, which is opening up in HR, a police officer who we have not had on staff, that position filled for a number of years, and someone in Parks and Rec. We wanted to take advantage of vacancies to assess and restructure staffing if possible or if needed. And we were hopeful to revisit the budget at the end of first quarter when the staffing analysis was complete, when budget certainties were a little clearer. So I share that with you with the understanding that this is a community process, and we presented what we thought was a really good starting place. And I appreciate all of the comments that have come in and all of the feedback around the budget. So that is our task tonight. Council's got a hard meeting yet ahead, and with that, I will turn it over to.
Are there any questions for the manager? Any council online? Council? I'm going to revert to, hearing none, I'm going to revert to Mayor's report for a minute. I left one important item off, and I wanted to reemphasize one of the other items. So I mentioned the talking points with the governor, but it was a very, very positive conversation. And if you remember, some months back, we kind of made a choice, a council-supported choice, to reach out and try to grab the high ground and emphasize the things that were important to our community and work towards those, including fisheries in the harbor. And we're there. It was a very positive conversation. In fact, he expressed his appreciation for my leadership, but really it's community leadership, because said it's Cordova has been basically the only community that keeps coming forward with solutions. And going through those items and thanking for the things that went right is just something that the administration and legislature hasn't heard a lot. And it's a lot easier to have the conversation about what our priorities are, number one capital priority of the harbor, and get support for it. So I think that's been a good approach, and just reflects really community leadership and all the feedback and work that we've done as a community. The other item is the EVO's trustee deadline tonight, because that's something that you've had correspondence in this packet, some urgent requests to oppose all four of those, and you've heard public testimony tonight to support those. And frankly, I'm a little disappointed with the EVOS. I've heard the EVOS restructuring presentation 3 times now, and a lot of that's finally sunk in. And I've reached out to board members on the EVOS Trustee Council, and I'm very uncomfortable with this process and the timing that they put 4 very significant proposals forward at a time when nobody has the bandwidth to comment on them. We're coming right into the holidays. We're right in the middle of the budget session. We've got a pandemic going where we can't have any public testimony. And frankly, the trustee council hasn't been here in Cordova, and they haven't reached out to you, the council and leadership, with any communications. And I expressed that to the EVOS Reshaping Committee, and they did reach out and came here with a presentation a couple of months ago. So what I'm going to recommend is that either the council direct either Helen and I to reach out to the EVOS before the midnight deadline tonight and just express our opposition, not necessarily of the 4 proposals, but opposing them, passing them right now. It's just not fair to you as a council and to us as a community. And we're talking about $180 million of corpus that was directed at the spill affected region. So that proposal D, what that does is it lifts the requirement to apply those funds in the spill affected region. That's a court ordered boundary. And so when you take an ecosystem approach, you could go as far as to say that there are Alaskan salmon rearing off the coast of Japan and we should build something in Hokkaido. So that's what we're contemplating. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I just think you should have a chance to look at information, understand the implications before you write proposals for and against. And now is not the time for the council to be doing that. So that's my recommendation to you is to recommend that they don't pass those because they're not following the public process. There's 3 state officials and 3 federal officials that make those decisions. And at a time when economics are very important and the way that that's used in the spill affected region, in Cordova and our Prince William Sound communities were the most impacted. So that's my recommendation there. And then I'll defer to the city clerk's report. Is there any questions about that, council? So basically, I'm Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, I guess I didn't know if we were going to discuss that resolution or not, but when I heard the chance to buy out the coal field where coal is a dying industry, for somebody to go, the threat of developing that coal field is probably slim to none. And if Mr. Schmidt supported this resolution, then where is his letter in this correspondence? I don't like it when people kind of throw out names, say, well, they support it. We have no idea. So that was a couple of things that stood out to me on this, but I agree with everything you said.
The one other thing I think we should put in there is that we request that the council meet here. They've done that periodically, and I understand we have a pandemic on right now, but that's the whole point. Let's have an open public process and request that they meet here in Cordova once travel resumes and take up, because the other items are very significant as well. And I think it would be good to hear from the EVOS council themselves of what their thoughts are of setting up a permanent fund that can be in perpetuity instead of spending it all down. So, okay.
Mayor Copeland, Councilman Sherman.
Councilman Sherman.
Sure, I also agree with everything that you had just said, and I believe that EVOS should ask for an extended time to comment. Holiday season, and I'm just like trying to keep my head above water, but I have my comments and I've already been emailing some of them. I would ask too that they come and visit, and as a part of the funding that they provided for the Cordova Center, part of it was that they were going to hold their meetings here. They were going to use our facility. They recognized the fact that we were in the heart of this bill, and so call the card, call it. And yeah, it's just a really hard time. It's a really humongous big question, and I think we should weigh it heavily. 46% of the funding is going to administrative overhead, and I think we should discuss that. And, Dave Schmidt, he's in Juneau. We can get these people here, and they should be here to talk to us. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Yes, our Science Center has a very large capital campaign, and they've been a recipient, and it gives them access here to the council as well here in Cordova. So, any other questions or comments on that, council? Councilman Gleason?
As I remember, I think they wanted to drill for, they want the coal field, but they want to drill for oil, right? And if they can go in there, they can run their lines all the way from there across the flats, all the way out in front of the flats. And
another dying industry.
But that's what they're, it's not the coal field itself, I don't think. I think it's just the area just so they can.
Well, that's a point. I think there's information that I think you need to hear before you're asked to weigh in on resolutions.
Yeah.
And your manager, I mean, we just haven't had a chance to look at this, and for good reason. Any other questions or comments?
For good reason. You're an idiot.
You know, we submitted this weeks before
So, Carol,
meeting.
we can hear you guys. You need to mute or hang up, please. We're in the regular council meeting now. If you can hang up, please. Okay, hearing no council comments, on to city clerk's report.
Did you want to hear from each of them or have a concurrence to where you guys are going to do that?
I was just giving them, we could take that up now. Could we have a concurrence?
Yeah.
I've heard 1, 2, 3 councilmen speak in favor. Councilman online, Councilman Myers.
Councilor Meyer.
Meyer.
Yeah, I agree on the timing. These are just big changes, and for all the resolutions, you know, I kind of skimmed through them, but it's just hard to digest right now. We really need a lot of time, and I agree with what you guys said. I think EVOS needs to meet in Cordova, where the affected community, and they need to be meeting in Cordova, and we need more time to discuss these things and learn about them. And I think the whole EVOS office should be moved to Cordova. Personally, I think they should hold all their meetings in Cordova. So I agree that this is just not the time.
Councilman Gard. I'm sorry, Councilman Schaefer.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. I also agree with your comments that you said about public process and also the timing of this. So I would support a letter about that. And yeah, it's been hard. I feel like these are big questions, and we've been able to ask questions of the think tank of citizens and then also the people that presented tonight, but without being able to ask questions of the trustee council, it's challenging to get all sides and really weigh the resolution. So I would also be supportive of trying to get some sort of feedback from them. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Gard.
I concur with your proposal.
Okay.
Just no time to digest it in.
So just to reiterate for the record, we're going to submit an opposition of considering them at this time, not necessarily opposing or supporting the proposals themselves, but opposing the timing and asking them to postpone those until we have public testimony access, and we would like them to meet in Cordova to have a conversation. Okay, thanks. Clerk's report.
I just wanted to say one thing. On page 17 of the packet is the first public notice for the election. I'm just getting a handle on the new Title II with dates and deadlines. So declaration of candidacy opens Friday. Please look again at page 17. It closes February 1st. In my report, I had given an incorrect date, but the notice on 17 has the correct dates. So that will go up Friday. And people can read that, and then everything will be on the website and posted around town and in the newspaper. That's all I have to report.
Okay, any questions, council? Okay, thank you. So we have a significant correspondence, Alaska Municipal Lead Award to the city for distinguished municipal leadership. Again, very a great win by the whole community working together, as Superintendent Russin mentioned. We've just led on all fronts really with our medical team, had great support from EAC Corporation and others from the state, and we've been able to have our schools mostly in person. We've kept the community protected from community spread. I think it's well deserved. Then we've got letters from Hayden regarding police funding, Hicks regarding police funding, the letter to Governor Dunleavy regarding harbor grant, email from Shipman regarding police funding, a letter from Winters regarding police funding, a letter from Hicks regarding police funding. Any comments, questions on correspondence, or any comments on correspondence, Council? Councilman Baylor?
Yeah, just to say that just to let these folks know that I do read them all and do consider them. And then when there's an issue like this, I try to go outside of that circle to get more information. So I appreciate their input.
Any other comments on correspondence? Yes, Councilman Sherman.
I was going to echo what Councilman Baylor said. I did read everything, and I responded and had some good conversations. So I behoove everybody to write in this weird time where calling in doesn't work and running into you on the street doesn't work. So I'm reading the letters, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Other comments, Council? Okay, ordinances and resolutions. Resolution 12-20-42, a resolution of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, adopting an operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2021.
So move.
Second.
Have a motion, Allison, and second, Baylor. To your motion, Allison?
Was staff going to give any kind of report at all tonight, or?
I think at this point, this document is presented to you, incorporating the feedback we got last Wednesday during the work session. It's presented to you as a final document from staff. Obviously, we now are aware of at least one change that could potentially impact this budget, and that would be the governor's agreement to pay 50% of the school bond debt, which would be $460,000 if approved. And aside from that, that's the only recommendation that we have to add to the discussion if there's any tonight.
Allison?
Okay, then I support the budget, obviously, not in this form in particular. I'm not sure all of the numbers I would like to change, but I'm not sure how to go about it. I have 5 things that I would like to propose, and I guess let me start by just saying that we're required by code to produce a balanced budget for our operating budget. How we get to that balanced budget just needs to be reasonable and possible, I guess, is how I'd like to put it. So I've got some concerns with taking money from the permanent fund at this time when I don't see a critical need in taking it at least in the first half of this year. We've got several options that are out there that we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we're going to get CARES funding that could free up some of the emergency responders funds. We don't know what our expenses are going to be for that. We do have, as of yesterday, $5.7 million in our repurchase agreement account, which is our checkbook that we use to pay our bills. So that is not in any danger of going to zero anytime soon. So I guess what I'd like to do is suggest some changes to the budget, and then after I discuss what I'd like to do, I'll make a motion to that effect. But I don't think making the motions one by one don't make sense without hearing the whole proposal, I guess, from what I've been thinking. First thing I'd like to do is add in the 4th officer. We've heard a lot of comments, and of course every police officer and ex-chief that I've talked to has certainly said that it's very difficult to do with 3. I recognize that we've had 3 on staff for the last little bit for the inability to hire another officer, but we also had a chief that was willing to put in his own time plus enough time to cover another officer and a half. I think in one of his letters, he said 2,600 hours in 2019. It was probably the same number of hours in the 8 months that he worked this year. I don't expect any salaried person of any department to work 3.5 or 2.5 positions.
So Councilman Allison, I'm just thinking this is kind of taking the form of an amendment. If you want to lay out those 5 items, then maybe you can discuss them as an amendment if we can get a second.
Well, if I can get a second to my amendment, first thing I'd like to do is amend the amount on the resolution to $16,415 or for $16,415,527. And in the details of that, I would want to add in a 4th officer at $120,000, add in school bond debt reimbursement revenue of $450,000, modify the raw fish tax number to $900,000, modify the sales tax number to $3.1 million, and modify the public accommodations tax to $173,452. That would be my motion.
Okay, do you have a summary on those items of what that net change is? Like?
Yep, the net would be 0. That would be a balanced budget without any money from the permanent fund. Well, I guess the amendment would need to zero out the permanent fund number. The transfer from or transfer out.
Okay.
Can I just get clarification, because I'm trying to run these numbers so that we can get you a document. I heard the revenue side. I'm not sure I heard the complete expense side. I had 120,000 for an officer. Were there other things?
Yes.
Okay.
That was the only thing on the expense side.
Okay.
Thus, the $16,415,527 is your number plus 120,000.
Yeah. Okay, and then I had $450,000 revenue for the school bond debt, so that'll go from 0 to 450. But then if the final number is 900 on the, which item was that?
Raw fish tax,
Raw fish tax.
900,000, that's adding $250,000.
Okay, that's what I was after, plus 250 there. And then on the 3.1 million sales tax, is that an increase of?
That increases 170,000 from the
170,000,
proposal.
okay. Okay.
And then the public accommodations tax is an increase of 23,452 to zero everything out.
Okay, and then is there a second for discussion?
Second.
Second, Baylor. Okay, now if you want to kind of discuss those items in your thought process.
Okay, well, the first item was the total dollar amount on the resolution, and really all that's changing in the resolution header is the total dollar amount, and that's adding in the 4th officer of $120,000, which is really the only total it changes. The others is just offsetting the permanent fund amount and that. So the school bond debt, we've heard the reports tonight about school bond debt, 460,000. I was being conservative, putting $450,000 in there. The odds are good, as we heard from Bitney and others, that we'll get that. We don't need that money right away. Those bond debt payments, April 1st is $235,000. September 1st, $57,000. The big portion of that on October 1st is the $1.15 million that has to be paid on those school bonds. So there's not a big push to get cash to pay for those in the first half of the year, at least. So I think that's a reasonable number to put in our budget. The raw fish tax, salmon season in general wasn't good, but the ground fish, there was 300,000 pounds more black cod delivered this year than last year in Cordova. 100,000 less in halibut, but there's other ground fish, and You know, PISWAC got their cost recovery, VFDA got all their cost recovery fish. There wasn't any floaters in the sound. So I think it's reasonable to make that number somewhere in between what was projected and what we had the last 2 years. I was on the council, I don't know, some of you were also on the council it wasn't 3 or 4 years ago. We thought it was a disastrous thing in our budget too, and we budgeted, I think, 800,000 last year, and then we got 1.4 million or something like that. So it's hard to tell, but for sure, we'll know by April because the reports have to go into the state, and we've been told by the state anyway, our manager has said that we should be able to call them and get a decent number on that once all those reports are in. So by April, we will know. Sales tax of $170,000, adding that to putting that at 3.1 million puts us in between 2019 and 2020. I would hope that, you know, we all hope that the COVID thing isn't quite as bad as it was this year. We know we're starting to get some money from the online purchases. So I think that's a reasonable number to put in, and others that I've talked to, previous council members have thought that was reasonable as well. Sales tax of 3.1 million it's again in between. Oh, did I just say that one? Yeah. It's in between, so I think we're okay, reasonable. Public accommodations tax, making that 173,452. That's about where it's going to come out this year. And we had COVID 9 months of the year. I would certainly think that we could at least do that next year and probably more. It's somewhat less than it was last year, but it's the same as we got this year, putting it at 173,452. So with those revenue additions, that gives us our $120,000 to pay for our fourth officer. I think we've heard plenty of testimony that says if we want some community outreach and we want to keep the officers we've got and not run them all ragged, and we want to fulfill the airport contract, and we don't want tons of on-call time and overtime call, and you want an officer on duty when you call and need help, then I think we really need that fourth officer. And there's money to pay for it. And with these things, we don't have to take money out of the permanent fund. I think we will know by early summer for sure about the bond debt. You know, as soon as the legislature gets out and the 30 days has passed where the red pen can come out, we'll know that bond debt number. We'll know probably in, you know, certainly hopefully no later than February or March, probably sooner than that, about any CARES funding that we might get. We don't have to pay the bond debts until later. The worst that can happen is the middle of the summer, we're going to have money for school bond debt payments, and we're going to come back and then have to take money out of the permanent fund. If none of these things come true, if we don't get the bond debt reimbursement, if we don't get the sales tax, if nobody's buying anything, if the raw fish tax comes in really crazy low as we think it might, as some think it might, then the worst that can happen is we can come back to the permanent fund later. If we take it out of the permanent fund now, it's going to be very difficult to put it back in. And my fear is that then we'll get CARES money, then we'll get bond debt reimbursement, then we'll have a bunch of extra money, and everybody will find a way to spend it. And if we leave it in the permanent fund now, we can hopefully get some returns on it. Hopefully the markets will continue to be good, and I think it's a reasonable approach to get us at least through the first 6 months. And we said we were going to come back and revisit the budget anyway. I think it will be good to do that, and then we'll know some of these numbers instead of guessing like we are today and depleting our permanent fund. So anyway, that's my speech on my amendments.
Okay, what I'd like to do, council, if there's no objection, and it's quite common to, especially proposing amendments, is to get the manager's feedback on the fiscal notes. And what you've touched on here, budgets on revenues and expenses are always estimates. And, we do have a new manager, fortunately, one that you selected with business background, but has had a chance to do almost everything except focus on business, and then a new finance director. So thank you for laying out a rationale that is reasonable, and it's they are, again, just estimated numbers. So if there's no objection, Helen, if you want to.
Yeah, I think the reality is that the numbers presented in these budget, while they were carefully factored in the realities of what we know, there's a lot that we don't know. So for instance, on raw fish tax, I know that our catch in Prince William Sound was 45% lower than previous years. So, and the price was similar. So we extrapolated and took 45% a reduction to the raw fish tax that we received this current year. Is that reasonable? On some level, is what Councilman Allison saying reasonable? Absolutely. So I think the reality is that as we all know, we don't know until the check comes in, and we can cross our fingers and hope and take educated guesses, and that's really what a lot of these revenue sources are. So I can agree that there are folks with more community experience and maybe more institutional experience, and certainly more industry experience that can bring different numbers to the table. So the only thing I will say is that while we do have cash, the cash in the general fund is 1.3 million. That's what we use as our float. Everything else is in the bank, and it's in different funds. So I just want to be clear about that. We can borrow from those different funds, but the general fund itself has just over $1.3 million in cash.
Okay, thank you. So Councilman Baylor, to your second on the amendment.
Yeah, well, thank you, Councilman Allison, for pretty much agree with where you're headed with this. I was having trouble following the numbers, but you've got them down there. But the premise, I totally agree with. We don't need the money right away. Your worst case scenario is we have to come back and then pull some money out of the dividend, the permanent fund, which makes total sense to me. Why go down this budget and pulling that much money out of our permanent fund, and then all of a sudden we've got school bond reimbursement coming, we've got these other things. It's invested now, it's working for us. I think I like where you're headed with that. I do support the fourth police officer. I've read all the letters, but more importantly, I went outside of that circle and talk with people, and several retired state troopers and some acting state troopers. And the one gentleman I talked to the other day, state trooper, basically, he said, he sees it all the time here. He said, you get these young officers come in, they're all full of hope, and they're all excited, and they work hard, and they make cases, and they're getting overtime. And he said about 8 months, 9 months later, he said their heads are down, their shoulders are slumped, they're just wore out. And about a year and a half later, they leave. He said, you've got to be able to have a force. These people have to have an opportunity to have days off where they know they won't get called. And I've thought a lot about that, is that, we all go out to the road, we go out to the glacier. They can't do that. They can't be 4 hours away. They've got to be right here. Now, if you live in a city and you're on call, you go to the theater, you go to the restaurant, you're always 5 minutes away, but Cordova's lifestyle is totally different. So I definitely support that fourth officer, and I think you've come up with a good funding source to support that. So overall, I don't see, I guess I'll second the budget that Mr. Allison put forward. I agree with it.
Okay, so I'm going to go in order for council comments regarding the amendment to the budget. which net effect zeroes out the permanent fund. Just a reminder, that does require a super majority of council to draw that down, so structurally, there's a little more flexibility there. And then basically, it's modifications and revenues to zero out the permanent fund, acknowledge the bond reimbursement by the state, and then add $120,000 expenditure. Councilman Schaefer.
Thank you. Okay, let me think about this. I'm definitely comfortable adding in the school bond debt amount. I think Councilman Allison said $450,000, but I thought that our city manager had said that it would be possibly $460,000.
That is our best estimate. Yes, 460.
Yeah, so I mean, for the amendment, I don't know if we would want to match that with the best estimate for the $460,000 for the school bond debt. But yeah, so I think we should definitely add that back into our budget, and that puts us in a lot better place. The raw fish tax is definitely not my lane. Reduction that the city manager said makes sense, but also Councilman Allison, has a longer, more experience with that number, and the fishermen in town and on council also understand the context of what goes into that number much better than I. So I don't necessarily know one way or the other which number is going to be more accurate. The sales tax, again, I mean, the 2.9 that's in the budget for next year seems like it would make sense. Again, Councilman Allison says hopefully people will be spending a little more money at more establishments next year as COVID restrictions ease. So I could see that being a little higher. But also I know staff had rationale behind these numbers as well. I agree with the idea of waiting as long as we can to draw from the permanent fund. I think that makes a lot of sense that Councilman Allison brought up. We've had these discussions now. About facing the reality of potentially drawing from the fund, but if we don't need to, I'd rather keep it in there and draw from it, when it comes to that point, if we don't have these funding sources show up. So I'm supportive of that. As far as the police position, that one is still tricky for me. I mean, I'm definitely supportive of continuing the conversation, hearing what the committee comes up with. We're not just funding that position for next year. We have to fund it. If we have this new person in the position, it's not just funding it for 1 year, it's funding it for hopefully many years down the line. So it's not just a one-time commitment, it's a multi-year commitment. And this is a weird year, I know, but I mean, I feel like every year I've been on council, we've encountered these really big budget gaps. So it's not like this year's the first year that we've had a budget deficit that we've had to encounter. It's been every year I've been on council. So I'm not sure. I mean, for funding the police position, at this point, the person who is potentially in the pipeline doesn't have a completed background check, as I understand. And wouldn't be starting right away, wouldn't be starting right away on January 4th. So another way to save money in that position would be to maybe budget it for like a 3/4 position for next year. But I am also interested in continuing the conversation about public safety in town and looking at retention and hiring in the police department and what we can do to, help those positions and people in those positions want to stay. So yeah, those
Okay.
are my thoughts right now.
Okay, thanks, Councilman Schaefer. And that's a good organized approach, saying that of all the elements here, you're in favor of all of them except one. There may or may not be a little flexibility on that, but I think that's a good path, council, to just on this amendment. If there's certain elements, those can be broken out, I guess, as another amendment. But Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, I'm in favor of all of that except for how we pay for the police officer. We've already kind of discussed that our alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana tax is more than enough to fund the police officer. And it's just going to disappear in the general fund blender right now. So I would rather see us justify the hire off of that money, and then maybe the money that Dave's been able to pull together with his amendment can go to the school, because we're kind of leaving them hanging out to dry. We're giving them a in-kind on insurance of $100,000 that I don't see listed in any other years. So you're looking at $220,000 in-kind versus $120,000 last year. So that, that's kind of a hit, and I'm curious it looks like this is the first year we've actually accounted for this on the budget this way. And so that's a hit, and then of course the lower amount, the 6% reduction. So I would like to see us budget them for the similar amount that we did last year, which it looks like was about 1.9 million. Instead of the 1.6, I think that it is this year. I'm not sure that's the exact number that we're doing.
Okay, so I'll defer to the manager for a fiscal note on the.
Sure. So we have given for the last 2 years, our calendar year, 1.750 to the school district, plus about $126,000 in kind. It includes the insurance, and it includes utilities that we pay for and other services. So, and that's been consistent. I think there was, the insurance didn't get booked correctly this last year, and there was a correction made, but it has definitely been reflected in the contract we have with the school and is accounted for. It's not new. And again, the total we've given is 1.750 million.
Excuse me.
Almost had the big one.
So what we have done that's a little different is that how much we pay in the first half of their school year versus the second half of their school year. That number has fluctuated a little bit, but the way we have funded so far is that in June, you all passed a resolution agreeing and adopting funds for their fiscal year, their school year, 2021. And then we would be looking in the spring and that takes care of the first 6 months of 2021. So right now you have committed to $1.044 million for the first 6 months of fiscal year 2021. And then in June, you will look at and be asked by school district to fund a proposal that they'll bring to the table for their fiscal year 22, their school year 22. If that was clear, I'm happy, but if it wasn't, let me try that again. Did anyone understand that?
Well, it's a little confusing. So what did we actually budget them? What was the entire amount we budgeted them last year?
$1.750 million in cash and $126,000 in kind.
Okay, and then this year we're going to
Same, 1.750 in cash, and that takes them through June 30th of 2021, and $126,000 in kind.
Okay, so my in-kind looking here is $220. There's $100,000 for insurance, and then different payments of 60,
What page are you on, Dave?
Yeah, I'm
53.
53.
We got school in-kind insurance, and then school in-kind January, June, school in-kind July, December. So you got a 60, and 100,
Ken, can you address that?
220,000.
Yes, I think that's, that the 100,000 was incorporated in the other ones, it was split in the other items, according to Dean. I haven't seen the backup of that. I just was looking, when I did the insurance analysis, the school wasn't analyzed, and so it may be double counted. I'm not.
So that's a number we're going to clarify, and we'll get.
You're not helping me, Ken.
Yeah.
So my math says 220 for next year's budget.
So it should be, we should lower that number to 126, which I believe is the number we.
And 126 in this year.
You've got
I don't have.
next year's budget.
Wait.
Boom, boom, boom.
I don't
and
think
previous year's budget.
we didn't have insurance
Boom,
in the past.
We did.
Oh, okay.
I double checked that. We did have.
It's not on the budget though, so.
It wasn't listed on our budget.
Okay. We have actual contracts with the school with 126. I don't know, Alex, do you want to confirm what we've done or haven't done so that we are true to what we've done in the past? That from your knowledge, because apparently we're not clear. The contract I have here says 126 for in-kind, 1.750 for a cash contribution for.
That's correct.
Okay.
The insurance that council member Mason is referring to, I think is in question, that amount.
I'm sorry, we can't hear on the phone.
Yeah, here we go. Alex is coming to the mic so you all can hear.
Right, so the contribution of 1.75 in cash is understood, and that's what we had, agreed to. That's what council identified, and the 124 or 126,000 in-kind services has historically been pretty close to that number. And that's typically separated into two different contributions, right? You have your spring contribution, which is the last half of our one fiscal year. And then in the fall, it's the start of a new fiscal year for us, but it closes out your fiscal year. I think the number that Councilman Gleason is referring to as a 100,000 in kind for insurance is that is a new line item to my recollection. The other in-kind contributions in the past have encapsulated that insurance number.
We apparently have double listed that on our budget, and we will remove it. Or we will clarify that, and if the amendment needs to be made, but at this point that needs to be removed, and we will adjust accordingly. It's in kind, it's a cost that we incur, and we do not bill school for, so we'll make sure that those numbers are correct. And there should be a representative offset in the budget, so we'll just double check and make sure that's correct. But again, it doesn't cost the school. It comes out of city budget.
Yeah. So just strike that 57008 line there because that 100,000 should be embedded in that 63 plus 63, which is a 126.
Okay.
So just to summarize your comments and separate out. So there's a question about the allocation, and that, again, from last meeting, that's kind of a legal question that I think we need to get from the attorneys or something, but we know that we've collected revenue through alcohol tobacco tax, and the amendment proposes an additional $120,000 expenditure. So leaving aside the how it's allocated or accounted for, it sounds like you're in favor of all the amendment as presented, except that it doesn't include any modification for the school.
That's correct.
Okay, and what was just to facilitate the discussion, what's your proposal for the school? Because right now we have the school funded in council's last budget up through the first half of this year.
One thing just got fixed.
Okay,
The
gotcha.
insurance. So I just suggested we budgeted last year the same amount as last year, and now we have the same amount of in kind. So.
Okay, and that's what's been done, right, Helen? I mean, you've budgeted the same for this year as last year.
We reduced the school's allocation by 6%. So what is in the budget for next year should be reduced by 6%. And if the will of the body is to make that the same as last year, then we would add $706,000 to the already allocated $1.044 million that was approved in June for the first half of the school year in 2021.
I'm sorry, what was that amount that we had added?
$706,000 would be, the total would be 1.750. We've already allocated 1.044. So I'm confusing you all. The bottom line is it just needs to be 1.750 million for calendar year 2021 in our fiscal year budget. I will say that there will be an adjustment made. It doesn't impact the budget, but because of the state requirements, we have overfunded the school by $86,000, and the payments to the school would be reduced by that amount from the period from January through June 30th of 2021. And we'll make a reflection of that at some point, but you can allocate the 1.7, and this adjustment is basically a refund, if you will, from the school for an overpayment of around $86,000 in a previous fiscal year.
So you were actually going to comment on that 86 because that was in question, whether that was an overpayment or I thought that was going to get carried forward or something like that.
We have to, according to what we understand from our auditors, is if we overpaid, we have to record it as a reimbursement. And we're going to record it this year as a prepaid for 2021. It was brought to our attention by the district this fall, and we will record it as money that is basically prepaying for what we owe in 2021.
Okay. Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I don't think that's correct from reading superintendent's memo anyway. At least that's not from their side of things. I think it has to do with any supposed overpayment. I think has to do with the crossover of our fiscal year being a calendar year and their fiscal year being July 1st through June 30th.
We have to record the overpayment.
So the school has told us that they were overpaid, or who has
Alex,
told us
would you
that
like to comment on that?
The pitter patter of my heart. I'm supposed to be feeling this in our budget discussions, not the. So council's aware that in any given school year, right, not the city's calendar year or budget year, in any given school district fiscal year, there's a minimum statutory required contribution and there's a maximum allowable contribution. So what happened at the end of our fiscal year, which closed on June 30th, 2020, this past summer, it was discovered that there was about $86,000 that we had received from the city in the spring series of payments that was over the maximum allowable contribution. And that came about because of some variables in the funding formula factor, right? Where student numbers were a little bit different than what were projected. The property value assessment here in town was different than what was projected, and some in-kind contribution adjustments, very slight with the in-kind, were made. So conversations with Helen were around allocating that money that the district was already in receipt of towards the city's contribution in the fall, which in essence is the last half of your fiscal year, which is closing in a couple of weeks. So that $86,000 has already been accounted for in the city's contribution to the district in its fall payment.
Except for it hasn't, and that's where the rub is that we
Well,
have it.
wait a second. Can we let Alex finish? I want to follow this through, so.
Right, so we received 6 payments of $107,000 from July to December. So that gives $706,000 in the normal schedule of payments that would have occurred. When we add that $86,000 that the district was in receipt of from our previous fiscal year, right, in school district finance, we can allocate funds from one year to another year, to the next fiscal year. So $706,000 plus the $86,000 gives us, I'm not a math person, but 792,000
Something like that.
in cash contributions. So again, that part was already that was calculated in the city's spring payment, the first half of your fiscal year, right? But that was just moved as contribution to the fall payment in your same fiscal year. So there
Then was the city budgeted fall payment paid on top of that? So in essence, the city budget stayed the same?
Yes. So what we did is we paid $1.750 million to the school district in calendar year 2020. That is what we budgeted. The overpayment of $84,000 has not been factored into our payments or the budget. And so what we are proposing is that that payment, that $84,000, gets prorated not into the fall, which we did not do. It was an oversight on our part, misunderstanding, I guess, on my part. So we're booking the $84,000 this calendar year as a prepaid for calendar year 2021 for the first 6 months. So again, we have actually paid $1.75 million, which is what we budgeted for calendar year 2020. And the $84,000 that we overpaid has not been factored in at all. So, and this is where we have a kind of a misunderstanding or disagreement. I'm not quite sure how this works because the budget for the council approved, we have not exceeded that, nor have we underpaid it. But we did exceed what the state allowed the school district to receive in their school year that ended June 30th. So we are attempting to figure out a way to reconcile that in a way that doesn't harm the district, but doesn't go above what we budgeted.
Councilman Allison?
So you're saying we paid them 1.75 plus 86,000?
That includes the $86,000 that they told us we overpaid and they have to give back to the city. So that's where we're at. We gave them money with the assumption that that met the state requirements. They were informed by the state that they overpaid, that we overpaid. Our commitment was greater than what they were allowed by $84,000. The budget that we passed was $84,000 greater than what was allowed.
Doesn't seem right. I don't recall us giving them more than we could.
Well, I mean, and I know that the district didn't ask for more than we thought that they could receive, but the reality is we tend to go on the high side. We don't do the minimum. We go to the as high as we can possibly go. And last year, because of the per student count, whatever, the state said, "Whoops, your allocation is too much." So that's where we are at the moment.
So that, but at the end of the day, you're saying, well, because of the state's requirement, there's $84,000 of this $1.75 million they weren't eligible for. And then
Right.
Of course, we have the gaps in fiscal year. But the idea is that if we budgeted $1.75 million in this fiscal year, that 84 or 86 would come into that on top of the $1.75 million there, so that if they have the statutory room to receive it, that the city's budget is kind of still kept whole, but so is the schools? Is that what I'm hearing from you, Helen?
It really depends on how you guys want to handle it. I mean, one option is to say, okay, we're going to take the 84,000, we'll add it to our appropriation for calendar year 2021. So they don't get dinged for overpaying in 2020, their school year that ended June 30th. And we hold to our budget of $1.75 million. We did propose a 6% cut, and if that repayment were to be floated to 2021, it would basically reduce that cut. I don't know, and maybe Alex, you can address this, is how close are you to falling in the same situation, let's say, in this current school year? Because ultimately, that's what happened last year.
Well, wait a minute, we're jumping from thing to thing to thing. I'm just trying to bite this off one piece at a time. So if I'm understanding, and in fairness, this is Helen's first budget cycle. Like I said, she has been doing everything except touching the budget and managing the city this last year. So I just want to make sure we understand the context here. So that's why we're kind of leaning on you for a little bit of help here to clarify. But what Helen was saying, the council could take the $86,000 that really you weren't eligible for statutorily, but it doesn't change the city's overall budget if they had $1.75 million allocated for last year and then $1.75 for this year. That 86 that you kind of have to give back, if they stacked it on top of the 1.75 million here, or, in this fiscal year for the city, as long as you can receive that, would that take care of that part? I mean, does that kind of work?
In honesty, you've lost me. I've put a roadblock up at paying things back that has already been budgeted and accounted for in the city's budget. Quite honestly, when you start putting funds into your future budget that has already been received and accounted for, that then starts to impact future contributions that the city could potentially be given. We have this leapfrog sort of effect with our fiscal year.
So let me back up to the first step then. Is there a statutory requirement for you to return that money, from your budget?
No, because we've applied that to this year's budget, this year's fiscal year for us, right? So the options, when the state alerts a school district that there's been an overpayment, for example, by a borough or by a city, you really have three options, right? You can return the funds to the city, you can book them to a new fiscal year for the district, or the state reduces your next year's entitlement by that amount. Our discussions in November with Helen were to book that to this year's contributions, this fall's contributions by the city, to maintain the amount of money that was budgeted by the city in its 2020 budget. And that's what transpired.
Councilman Allison?
Yeah, I don't think it's the city's responsibility to worry about it. The school is the one that gets the notice from the state. The school understands that if they don't figure it out and return the money, then the state's gonna take that money from them and not give you money on the other side. So I just see this whole refund overpayment thing. You know, if we budgeted 1.75, then we write the checks and give them 1.75, and if they have to return some, they return some, but I don't think it's our responsibility to write it off from this fall and give it to next spring. And that's the same fiscal year for the school anyway, so that really doesn't.
And has that happened? Did the city
School's
write,
responsibility.
did the city write those checks for 1.75 million?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure we have an issue then.
Just I just wanted to put it back at what we had last year, which was the 1.75 million, instead of, I think it was 1.62 after the 6% decrease. So it would just go up about 13,000.
That was my next question. That sounds like a,
45.
Well, so 1645 until you move that 100,000 from the insurance up there, then it's 1745.
No, because the insurance is
That was
in kind.
That we've
Yeah,
never
but so is that,
listed before.
so it's not going in our expense line anymore, right? Or is it? Is it going somewhere else besides the in-kind?
It's in kind, so it's an offset at no cost to the district. So the cost to the district, what you're recommending is the 1.75, which was funded last year and the year before. And then we'll change the in-kind to 126, which is what we've budgeted for the last 3 years as well.
But I don't think we're saying yet, I didn't hear an amendment to change it to 1.
exactly. I'm just trying to understand what Councilman Glasson's actually asking. So 6% is 105,000. So 1.645 million. That sounds right. So 105,000 for the year. So
It would change the line item to 1.75 instead of 1.6, whatever it was at.
Okay.
Is all.
Okay.
But I have.
But you agree with the
agree with
rest of the
everything
amendment?
else.
But that piece was left off and.
I think we should, yep.
Okay.
We should do that.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Anything else, sir?
I mean, I don't know how to make that happen if Mr. Allison needs to.
Let's just go on through council to kind of see where we're at on the amendment, and then we can pick it up from there. So where is my list of council testimony amongst all this?
And just it'd be nice to show how small that amount is.
Look for your list.
Yeah. Well, I'll admit I get a little confused too when you cross the fiscal years if 6% is the, yeah, it's $105 million or 105,000 in the city's fiscal year. So anyway, Councilman Sherman, to the amendment, and I can repeat that for you if you like.
Yes, please do.
I was afraid you'd say that. Now I got to figure out where I have that scribbled down.
You want me to do it, Mr. Mayor?
Please.
Adding in the fourth officer of 120,000. Add in school bond debt reimbursement revenue of 450,000. Adding 250,000 more to the raw fish tax, making that 900,000. adding 170,000 to sales tax, making that 3.1 million, and adding a 23,452 to the public accommodations tax, making that 173,452.
And the net effect, Councilman Sherman, is that zeros the permanent fund draw.
Correct. Okay. I am going to go through the items one by one. I am certainly in favor of adding the fourth officer. I have different ideas about how that might be funded. After being enlightened today and yesterday with the governor's budget, I would agree that we could put that school bond debt in there. I think the 450 is a good number. Might not even be that much. Raw fish tax was the one I was going to come back with. I still think 900 is a little high. And I believe Mr. Allison, there used to be a pizza wagered over this, but number. But I'm okay with that. And I guess if we could eliminate sales or some of the other taxes, I would look at, if we fill this position, I would like to see a percentage come from the overtime dollars in the budget. I would increase the contract with Alaska Airlines for a percentage because we'd have another officer. And I'd also take maybe the balance to pay for the position based off the alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana tax, just a percentage, not the full amount. So that's where, in terms of long-term sustainability, I would try and fund the position for that. So other than that, I'm kind of in favor. I just have different ideas about where that fourth officer's funding should come from.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Councilman Meyer.
There's a lot to go through because I feel like we're in a really time crunch to get this balanced budget passed. I am in favor of passing a budget tonight that doesn't draw anything from the permanent fund or as little as possible, because that's not necessarily a guarantee. It takes 7 votes, and it's a big task to do, and I think none of us would prefer to draw down from it right now in our uncertain budget. I am concerned about expecting to get higher amounts that are proposed in this amendment. It's really hard to know the fish tax, but I think going 250 above what is presented in front of us is maybe a little high. The bed tax, I don't see it being the same as this year, but maybe it will be. Hopefully it will be. That would be good. Maybe that end of the year bump will bump us up to that number that's proposed in this amendment. But I'm not comfortable raising them to that level. I'm very confident in the school bond, and I definitely think that we should be plugging that in. And I am in favor of adding police officer to the budget. I'm just very concerned about the future years. The alcohol, tobacco, marijuana tax, it's not a dedicated fund, and it came up because we were having revenue problems. We're trying to fill holes. It is new revenue coming in, and so this year was the first year that we've been able to collect on it. And while it didn't come in what we were hoping to bring, it was to fill holes. There's already been holes in our budget before this year and COVID happened. So I'm a little concerned about fully just adding that position in tonight, kind of at the 11th hour when we've had a few work sessions, and I know that this year's been a hard year, and so we've had a few work sessions on it, and we all kind of agreed that we would revisit the budget as soon as possible. But right now, what we have to do tonight is pass a balanced budget. So I would need some tweaks to agree to this amendment.
Okay, thank you. And that's, so what I'm hearing is in general, you're in favor of zeroing the permanent fund. And then, but you're not comfortable funding the additional $120,000. So just kind of a reminder, and I guess a little bit of insight, Points North Hilly Adventures is, I know we're kind of in a different place with some of our revenues because they, for example, actually have a chance to plan. I know they've been working with our medical staff. There's new tools and protocols, vaccinations. We have resources on the ground. They are able to plan. So I think it's reasonable. And this gets back to, again, these numbers are subjective on revenues, but on the public accommodations, which will impact sales tax. Again, we have $1 million going out, and maybe that was factored in, but there's a sales tax bump there. And then on the raw fish tax, I'll just share, just because I've gone through my Cordova Electric budget, and we're very tightly tied to use. There's a lot of canning this year, and we had deliveries outside our region come to Cordova from Kodiak, Bristol Bay, and so forth. So I think it's reasonable to expect that there may be a bump in the raw fish tax. So I just throw that out because I've just seen some of those numbers in my own budgeting. But I think we got a good summary there and can move on. So to the amendment, Councilman Baylor, you already spoke to it as a second. And then we have Councilman Guard.
Could I mention one more thing real quick?
I didn't quite hear that.
Vice Mayor
One
Meyer.
more thing.
Vice Mayor Meyer, yes, please.
I was going to mention, and I'm sorry, I just skipped over that part of my notes, but I want to acknowledge that this budget tonight also is missing a lot of key things. We don't have chip seal in it. School district is asking for more money that's in it. No HR person, Parks and Rec, police department. There's just a lot of gaps, and I just worry about trying to fill maybe one gap or two gaps, and then we don't hold to our commitment to revisiting this budget, because I still think it needs a lot of work, but by code we have to pass a balanced budget, and I think we have to do that tonight. So, sorry, that was it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councilman Guard to the second. I'm sorry, to the amendment.
Okay, I guess I'll start down the line here. The $450,000 or $460,000 school bond debt reimbursement, I think we have a reasonable chance of getting that, but after watching the budget process the last couple of years in Juneau, I don't hang my hat on anything. Raw fish tax numbers, I'm not as confident at the $100,000 level as I am. Lower than that, we rattled off a few fish species from Councilman Allison there. One of them being down 100,000 pounds of halibut, the other being up 300,000 pounds of black cod. Black cod prices were completely in the toilet or below in the sewage lines. So I don't know that we're going to get much of a bump at all from black cod poundage there. I don't know what kind of fish we had imported this year. I can't guess on that, but we're trying to take a rosier and rosier and rosier picture of every line we can get on this to try to come up with some money someplace to make it look like a balanced budget, and I just think we're getting a little pie in the sky there. The school bond debt reimbursement I can deal with. Raw fish tax, like I said, I don't know that I'd go that high. I'd envision that our sales tax may do a little bit better this year, but I don't know. Then to start adding back into the budget, and God knows we've got plenty of needs here. Adding the 4th officer position in now, I am not opposed to supporting our police department, our police officers. They're members of the community. But I would like to look at some things here after the first year and we get through this budget process. And those would have to be structural changes to how we do stuff. We can't expect anybody to be consistently working the kind of hours our officers have been working, trying to give the kind of coverage we've been asking of them now, so shorthanded. So unless we came up with something as a community that was an alternative to the 20 hours a day coverage we've got 7 days a week, we're going to be there for, or maybe a 5th officer to make life livable for that. But I think it really behooves us as a community to sit down and have this conversation. We've started to talk about it a couple different times in the last 4 years since I've been on council this go around, and we've never really got any place or done anything on it. So I'd be more comfortable if we could take up looking at some systematic changes to our law enforcement here in Cordova, if any of that would work for us. If not, as a community, then it's time to pony up and pay the piper and figure out how to dig the money out of something. But I'd be more comfortable if we took the time after the first of the year to see if there are any systematic changes we could make to our police department. And that's no diss on any of our officers or chief or any of that. I think they've done great work here. I just wonder if we want to ask them to do it a little bit differently in the future. I guess that's about, as far as the school goes, I'm not exactly sure where I'm sitting on this. I know it's tough. I don't know that I want to try to drag money back out of them that's already been spent. That I don't think is a healthy way to go about it. I'd have to figure out where we can come up with the other 105 or 110 to make them the 1.75 that they're asking for, if that's where we want to go. So I'm kind of in with Vice Mayor Meyer that we've still got a lot of questions and a lot of work to do and no time to do them before we have to pass a budget.
Okay, so I'm going to try to summarize that. So, and I guess the missing piece is permanent fund. So if you're not in favor of, I guess being a little more optimistic with the revenue, with those revenues items, does that imply a draw on the permanent fund?
I don't want to draw on a permanent fund any sooner than we have to, but if we budget for a draw on the permanent fund, that doesn't mean we have to pull it out of the permanent fund immediately, does it?
No.
No. In fact, I think you need a supermajority to do that, and you just need a majority to approve the budget. So.
Okay. And if we wanted to, okay, so you'd have to approve the withdrawal from the permanent fund at a later date anyway with a supermajority.
I'm not sure.
So
It's in the budget.
I think I'd be in favor of covering our shortages under the line in the budget with the projected withdrawal from the permanent fund. I'd like to keep it as low as.
Yeah, I think council's making a commitment to fund it from the permanent fund as the source, and then when the time, then the action to do that is. But before we move away from Councilman Guard, I just want to give Manager Howarth a chance to speak to a fiscal note there.
I just want to clarify, and I don't want to belabor this, but it is real money. try to identify how the school allocation works. So from July 1 to June 30th, July 1, 2019 to June 30th, 2020, the school district had $1.75 million to spend. We gave it to them. The state said, nope, you're only allowed to get $1.664 million from the city. So we overfunded them by 86, and the state said, you cannot accept or use that money from the city. So that floated. And I heard from Alex in the fall, he wanted to move that into the fall of 2020. We have already allocated for their fiscal year, their school year 2021, which is July 1 of 2020 to June 30 of 2021, $1.75 million. So the big question is, where does that $86,000 go? It was, if we had known when we put our budget together that they could only spend $1.664 million of our resources on their school year, we would have done that. And the school would have asked for that. I mean, they don't want to be in this position. But there is still $86,000 floating around out there that we have to account for, that we've been informed we overfunded. So we're back to that piece. It's not an insubstantial number. I just want to reemphasize that. I know they've spent it, but we also have to account for it through our audit with our auditors that we have $86,000 that needs to be accounted for. And I contend it would be accounted for in 2021, the first 6 months to get it off the books. It's only $86,000. It doesn't solve our budget problem. But when you start looking at money in that kind of context, $450,000 here, $86,000 there, we do start to plug that hole that we're looking at. So I just wanted to bring that up. Also, I really feel strongly that a 3-month pause to really look and address the fiscal realities and also any efficiencies that we can gain by really looking at the various departments will give us an opportunity to save some money and really make sure that we're funding the right positions and giving our departments the resources they need to do their work. So I end with that.
Can I ask one more question?
Councilman Guard.
So the school district moved the money that we gave them in their fiscal year and our year off by 6 months there, so we overlap in a weird way. But they moved the money, the $86,000 from last year to this year. So if we allocate 1.75 now, and we've already got that 86 in it, is that going to be a can we're continually having to kick down the road?
That is a question for Alex, is if we're overfunding them, what is the likelihood that we're doing the same for this next year? What is the state going to do? And I don't have an answer to that question.
Well, the last part of my question is, whatever we overfund the school district, if this gets to be a compounding problem going down the road, and whatever we overfund them, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but the school district doesn't lose anything. The state just lowers their contribution and the city ends up paying part of the state stuff, if I understand this right. So maybe Alex or something, if he's there, could explain that to me?
I think this is the last time I'm going to take the mic tonight. I hope, at least.
I'm just confused, Alex. That's all I am. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I think I'm not even sure where to start, Councilman Guard.
So you mentioned three options, Alex, when you get a notification
Right.
from.
Our fiscal year 20 is closed.
Yeah.
So the city gave and appropriated the amount that they had agreed to.
Yeah.
Absent that 86,000. Yes.
So, okay.
And
so you didn't get that you didn't get that, the rest of that 86,000.
In FY20, we got what the city appropriated, what they budgeted, plus 86,000. Right? So when we talked to city manager in November, we didn't know what that number was going to be at the time, again, because of the variables, right? Student numbers, in-kind contributions, and just other variables. We then had a conversation, and during that conversation, it was agreed to any payments that were over the maximum allowable contribution could be moved to the fall, right? Which was, again, in the same fiscal year for the city. So that time frame came around in June, and we close out our books and have the amount of approximately $86,000, which was above the maximum allowable contribution. The state says you have a couple of choices. You can roll that money forward into a new fiscal year. You can pay that back, or we deduct your state entitlement, right, based on what the allowable maximum amount that we can have is.
So if you roll it forward in the next fiscal year, basically it doesn't upset that coming fiscal year's calculation of what your minimum and maximum thresholds are?
Correct, because the minimum and maximum calculation for this fiscal year for us has already been established, and that's $1.974 million. That's the maximum amount that the city could contribute. What the city has agreed to for this fiscal year for us is $1,874,000. That was signed by the city manager in June, on June 30th, 2020, and we subsequently submitted that to the Department of Education, which we have to do yearly by July 15th. So, of that amount, of that $1,874,000 in our fiscal year this year, we are in receipt from the city of $706,000 plus $86,000. That's cash, and then there's an in-kind value of about $60-some thousand. So you add that amount up, and that gives you about $855,000 or so, if I'm mentally doing the math.
I think what we need to do, if I can interrupt, is set an actual amount that you want to contribute to the schools. The school district, as Alex is explaining, budgets very differently than we do. So we never change our allocated amount for a fiscal year. It's been 1.75 million for 2 years, and prior to that was 1.95. He has a number that is different. It's 1.874, which is based on traveling across 2 years and how they don't allocate it equally over 6-month terms. So there's no way that what he's describing will make any sense to you in your budgeting. And so I would just recommend we set an allotment and be done with the conversation.
Okay. Councilman Allison?
Yeah, let's jump on the Allison thought train for a minute.
Okay. And by that, you mean your amendment?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the discussion that has happened, we're round 2, right? regarding this, again, with this $86,000, I think that's a school issue. It has nothing to do with us. We budgeted 175, we gave them 175. Whether we wrote that check in May or we wrote that check in November, it really doesn't matter to the city, because our fiscal year is the calendar year. Because the school has to account for it differently, that's their problem. That's why we pay them the big dollars over there at the school to take care of that. Regarding their budget as a whole, I guess I'm in favor of leaving it where it's at in this budget now and zeroing out it as my amendment says, with the thought that their real budget that we need to consider comes out in May. And we have to approve that in May or June before the end of their fiscal year so that they can submit it to the state. So this is just, I don't want to say penciled in number, but in May, we can then, when they present us their budget and we look at it, what I would hope that they come to us with is, if we don't get an extra $100,000, we're not going to be able to have home ec this year, and that's a decision we have to help them make. If I don't like giving money just to give money, but if there's and I've said it before at this table over the course of many years, if there's a reason for needing the money, then I'm certainly willing to look at it at any time, at any point in the year. Just because we've got a budget that's done now doesn't mean we can't consider something else in the future. So in May, we will know a lot more details. We'll know about CARES. We'll know about fish tax. We'll have a good idea on how sales tax is going. We'll, so that's the school. That's how I think we should handle the school. Regarding the police, I believe that 4 is a minimum and that we should continue these discussions, and we should indeed have the discussion in the spring or winter, or, whenever that continues, whenever that committee gets together and has some recommendations to make. I think anything that we decide to do would be in addition to that. So I still all in favor of the 4th officer. And regarding whether or not you're calling it the ATM tax, paying for that officer, yeah, call it what you want. We can't dedicate taxes, so all the poker chips go into the table and we throw them around wherever we want to. If you want to throw the ATM chips to the police officer, I can go for that too. I do think that some of that ATM tax, if not all of it, should be going towards that. Then these other revenues just go towards filling out whatever you want to call it. I think that's it's just moving your chips around. It's the same chips all in all. So I think that it's a good proposal and it works. The other thing was mentioned that it's optimistic. Well, I don't hear from listening to everybody we've got any votes for taking money out of the permanent fund. And I believe at this point in time we can get a ruling from somebody for sure. But if we vote on the budget and we're using permanent fund money to fund that budget, I believe that it takes 7 votes to even budget that money. I don't think we can budget using $500,000 and get 4 votes, and then 3 months from now, when it comes time to give that $500,000, we're not guaranteed to get 7 votes at that point in time. So I think at the budget time, you need the votes, and I don't see the votes now. And I prefer to think optimistically, because if you don't think optimistic on some of these other revenues, then what's your other choice to balance the budget besides cutting $400,000 from something else?
Okay.
And so
let me summarize the discussion from council. And basically, as Allison said, I heard basically unanimous consensus around zeroing the draw from the permanent fund. This amendment proposes to get there by optimistic revenues. The manager I'm saying if not concurred, at least agrees that those are reasonable assumptions, that those are somewhat subjective numbers. The only piece of the amendment, the two pieces of the amendment I don't hear concurrence on is funding the police officer position for $120,000. I heard some in favor and some opposed. And then on the school, as Councilman Allison pointed out, there is another opportunity for council in your fiscal year to address the fall portion of the school year. So that's one mechanism. The other is to amend the amendment to add a school piece in and then discuss that as a separate amendment. So with that, we've had a lot of discussion. I'll just make two reminders. One is the requirement to approve a balanced budget. And the second, we have an 11 p.m. Code meeting deadline. So is there any other discussion from council on the amendment as proposed before going to vote? Councilman Gleason.
I can get behind what Dave said. And in addition, on that raw fish tax, we did process pinks from Kodiak and Seward that we normally would never do. And so that will also add to that pot. That's it.
Other discussion on the amendment, council? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Oops, I didn't think we were there. Melina Meyer,
No.
David Allison,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
No.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
the amendment carries 5-2.
Okay, to your main motion, Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I think that evens it out. I think the staff is going to have to do some number changing to get the backup and the table in the resolution correct based on that, but I'm in favor of it.
Councilman Baylor, to your second on the main motion.
I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Any other discussion on the main motion now amended?
Yeah.
Councilman Sherman.
Okay, Councilman Meyer and then Sherman.
I just had a question about fee increase. I didn't see anything in here that that broke down the numbers of what a 6 month not doing fee increases would do to the budget, or what a year would of not doing that.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch all
We had
of that.
discussed at the last meeting that maybe the fee increases wouldn't get put in play until July 1 rather than January 1. I think we decided it was, can you articulate what the amount was?
The amount to the general fund was something to the magnitude of, I think, and Helen, you might, was it like 40,000?
How to the general fund?
It would be,
In the allocated amount, correct.
I'm sorry, I was distracted a little minute because the fees are the next item of business, but Councilman Meyer's question is related to the overall budget. So are you saying that this budget reflects the fees starting in, increases starting in July 1st?
no, January 1.
Oh, January 1.
Yes.
Okay. Does
But
that
if
answer
they
your-
were to be postponed, approximately $40,000 impact to the budget?
Okay.
To the negative, of course.
So of course, a modifying the next resolution on the agenda will have an impact on this budget. So.
Sure.
Is that answer your question, Councilman Meyer?
Yeah, I just want to know what it impact on this budget, because
Yeah.
just thinking about it, it just doesn't sit well with me raising utilities. I know the reasoning and the rationality behind them, because we want these enterprise funds to be balanced and balance themselves. It just doesn't sit well with me doing a 5% increase during this time. So I wanted to know the impact of that, and I'll just let the discussion continue, because if I'm the only one doing that, then I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole.
Okay, well, good question, though. Councilman Sherman.
Sure, I just wanted to follow up. I voted in favor, and I will vote in favor of the motion, but I just wanted to follow up and have it on record that I do think we should evaluate everything, reevaluate this budget in the first quarter, and I would still like to see and advocate to give the manager the right and the direction to reanalyze all the departments. And, you know, maybe we start here with our first choices of police, EMS, fire, school. You know, they're what comes up first. So, and that could take years or a year, whatever. But I think we can get better at these budgets and more efficient as a municipality by allowing the manager to kind of take a look at some of these things. That's it.
Further discussion on the main motion as amended. Hearing none, roll call vote.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes?
David Allison,
Yes.
David Gleason.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, next item is Resolution 12-20-43, a resolution of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, adopting city service fees, rates, and charges for the 2021 calendar budget.
So moved.
I'm sorry, was that Councilman Schaefer?
Yes.
Okay. Schaefer moved, Allison second. To your motion, Councilman Schaefer?
I guess I have a question for city manager. So with the fees, I guess maybe it's not a question, more of a comment. For the fees, it was just hard for me to put these numbers in context without, seeing, in the normal budget, we see the 2019 actual and proposed. So just seeing not necessarily actuals and then what was garnered, but just what the rate history, the fee history has been, I think would be helpful moving forward in the future.
So the only rates we really changed were the ones that council had asked there be a 5% increase annually for 5 years. So this table really only reflects that piece. And if council, so we just took that direction, but we can certainly put in place what the fees have been over the last few years. But right now, the only ones that are reflected are those that are at 5% increase based on previous council direction.
Any other discussion to your motion, Councilman Schaefer?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Allison, to your second.
No comment. If staff's happy with it, I am too.
Okay, in order, discussion, Councilman Guard.
No comment. I'm in support.
Councilman Meyer.
Just echo my comments before that while I see these increases as a 5-year plan, I don't feel comfortable at this time doing that. I will vote in favor of the fee schedule just in general because it's part of our process that needs to get done.
Councilman Sherman.
Not to belabor or give anybody any more work, but as a former staff member, always trying to look at these right at the end of the year was kind of hard. And to Councilman Schaefer's point, it would be kind of interesting to see what kind of graphs there are on these maybe in June or July when we're not quite so slam. But the library gave away their fines, and they make more money now with donations than they do with fines. I'm just curious about that too.
Okay. Doesn't surprise me in Cordova. Any other discussion? Councilman Sherman?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councilman Gleason?
Nope, in support.
Councilman Baylor?
No, I'm in support, but I also think we need to start looking at our Parks and Rec department. I think there's some inefficiencies there as far as cost, what we're charging. Rates seem fairly low. We're half the cost when you rent the skater's cabin, it's half the cost of what the Forest Service charges for their cabins. And I know we're not going to balance our budget on these things, but I think the Parks and Rec needs to start picking up a little bit of their costs for the people that run that department. So, and I look in here and, we're providing showers for people in the summertime that don't live here. So as Councilman Sherman said, we need to look at everything, but that would be my first place to look. I think the police department, we've had months to look at that, and I've looked at it, and I don't know why you need more months to look at it if you haven't come to the conclusion that we need that fourth officer. So I will support the fees the way they're structured.
Okay. That sounds like consensus. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
David Gleason.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, next item is Resolution 12-20-45, which is a resolution of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, requesting the state of Alaska adopt specific quarantine and isolation procedures for individuals testing positive for COVID-19, to enforce such mandates and to establish uniform mandates that the city may rely upon in enforcing compliance with the state's quarantine and isolation mandates.
So moved.
Motion, Guard.
Second.
Sherman, second. To your motion, Councilman Guard.
I'm going to move that we table this till after the first of the year. This got done at my request, and the part of a broader conversation. There are some things I think we need some leadership from the state on, but I'd like to do this in a constructive manner and talk about a few things coming up. We have had state mandates on a number of things early through the year, but we had directions from the administration not to enforce any of those mandates. I believe there are some things that could happen here this winter that could greatly lessen the effects of the wintertime holiday surges we're looking at with it. So I'd like a little bit more time to think about this and work on this to see if we can come up with something that will maybe be palatable for the administration on the state level and helpful to the communities out.
Okay. Just a clarification, Councilman Guard, and actually, if I could get your help, Susan, tabling keeps it for this meeting. Are you suggesting we postpone? Is that your motion, to postpone until after the first of the year?
Staff?
Refer to staff.
Refer to staff. Okay.
Okay.
I'll second
sounds
that.
good.
Okay. So we have a motion to refer in a second. Is there any objection to referring this till after the first of the year? Okay, hearing none, it's referred to staff. And I appreciate that because there are some nuances here involving state rights and community rights and federal rights that I think the manager can help speak to. So unfinished business, we have mayor's appointment and council concurrences to city boards and commissions. And again, there's a handout here that Susan passed out. The real change is that I added a few to the published list, but here it is anyway for concurrence.
Move to concur.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to concur to your motion, Councilman Allison.
Just, does the public know these weren't all in the packet, right?
Correct. If you could say.
So if we just say for planning and zoning, Trey Losey and Sarah Trumbley, for Parks and Rec, Dave Zastro, for library, Krista Williams and Arissa Pearson, for historic preservation, Jim Casement, and for Harbor Commission, Max Weiss and Mike Babick.
Yes. Okay.
Who seconded that?
Councilman Baylor. Any discussion, Councilman Baylor?
No, just thanks people for stepping up and filling these positions. Appreciate it.
Okay. Any discussion, council? I'll just open it up.
Just one reminder that we're still looking for one planning commission.
That's right. We do still have a vacancy on the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I have checked with all of the commissioners that have, almost all of them, but one, and I haven't had interest in that, so we still need to fill that within the community. So we're on the concurrence, and there's a motion and a second as submitted. Any further discussion, council?
Yeah, this is Councilman Myers.
Councilman Meyer.
I was looking at all the applications, and I really appreciate everybody putting their name in for these. And the one that stuck out to me was the Harbor Commission, and looking at that commission, it's a commission of 5, and a lot of our other commissions and boards have more than that, with the exception of CCMC. So with all these big projects coming down the line, I think the other 2 applicants were really strong applicants, and I would like to include both of them and change that board commission to 7 seats, if that is possible tonight. Otherwise, I'd like to make an amendment to this meeting.
I don't think we can change the code tonight, and I'll just say this since you mentioned it, because I did do a little research, and Susan kind of reminded me. We were having a very, very difficult time getting a quorum for Harbor Commission. We were going over a year at times without having commission meetings, so I think we reduced that to 5. And that's why it's where it is now. We just happen to have more applicants than normal this year, but I hope that helps. But I don't think that procedurally we can change that board and commission size.
No, yeah, it's in code, so it would need an ordinance and 2 readings and 30 days to change it, but that can happen in the future.
But I appreciate the thought, and I actually asked that same question. So, because we do have strong applicants, and frankly, that was the very hardest appointment, because we do have strong applicants, and I think it is good to have some turnover in new ideas, and one of the councilmen asked that, but we have had kind of a long process infrastructure in place there. We have 2 incumbents that have been engaged in attending meetings, and so it was difficult. I thought continuity was good in this case. So, Councilman Baylor.
And, the other thing too is that these folks are still free to attend these meetings and give input.
Yes,
it's
thank you.
not that tight of a formally run meeting, and I'm sure they would appreciate that. So, and that's a good way to, once you've shown you're coming to meetings for a year or something like that, it definitely goes towards getting you onto that commission.
Yeah. Other discussion on motion to concur?
Hi, yes. Meyer again.
Councilman Meyer.
While I really do appreciate the continuity, and I think that having history on boards is really good, and I'll probably just bring this up at pending agenda to change that to 7, just because we have huge projects coming into the harbor, and sometimes fresh blood brings in different ideas, different questions, having look at things a little more closely. I just think it's a really good practice to bring different people in and different perspectives. And I think that is a pretty easy commission to go up higher during this time. We just have a lot going down, and there's a lot of eyes on the harbor. And I think that some fresh eyes on that commission would be really good.
Okay, we'll put that on pending agenda. Further discussion on a motion to concur? Hearing none, roll call vote.
David Gleason,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, discussion of COVID-19 emergency response. This is something council wanted. We did hear from Dr. Sanders. Any discussion on COVID-19 response? Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, so I had a pretty good conversation with a couple of local Cordovans, and they are not in favor of our face mask rule. You know, I am, and I just wanted to applaud the stores that implement that in front of their entry there where you are required. One thing that did come up that I thought I might mention, though, is that the stores do that on their own. We are not allowed to tell a private business what to do. So because we have a mandated face mask rule doesn't mean that's why those signs are there. So that was something that came up in that conversation. And so I just wanted to clear that up. And if other people are unhappy with the face mask rule, I'd love to hear public comment on that and whether you're in favor or not in favor. I don't know how much longer we're going to have to wear them if this vaccine works, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Other comments, council?
This is Councilmember Guard.
Councilman Guard.
Just a little bit of history behind the resolution and what my thoughts are, so you guys can all think about what you want to think about it. But when we hit our big spike before and had our 13 cases or whatever in town, we found that we had no authority to enforce a quarantine, to enforce quarantine on anybody that tested positive. And I don't know that we needed to at that time. Seems like everybody acted in good faith and stuff, but it wasn't something we had because the state hadn't got out in front of it. We've recently seen some of the same stuff with second-class boroughs not having the authority to do it in the state, urging them to go ahead and do it anyway. And there are just some things we could use some leadership and guidance from the state on, so I'd like to have a little bit of time to work on that and see if we can come up with something we could maybe talk the state into helping us out with to make all of our lives a little easier. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on COVID-19? Council, emergency response? Okay, hearing none, pending agenda. So we added a Harbor Commission item that can be picked up in a future meeting, a discussion of expanding that. Councilman Allison.
Can we, along with that, see if it's possible to have, and maybe somebody knows the answer now, but if it's possible to have 7, but in code somewhere, say that 3 is a quorum? I know like the electric company and the phone company have 1,500 members, but they're 800 members, but they count 50 as a quorum. I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah, like so a quorum can be a quorum of those present, for example, or something.
If we had problems in the past,
with
getting a quorum with 7 members, maybe we can.
That's a good point.
Okay, so cross boards and commissions.
is Melina.
Melina.
Perhaps too, the code could say that the commission has to have at least 5. Maybe instead of doing the quorum, so 3 people don't just, I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe just saying that the number that that commission has is at least 5, but council can make it up to 7.
Yeah, I think there's been rails, and I want to say there's been rails in the past that a commission, board of commission has to be X to X, but it may have been a different board.
So I'm just going to bring that back as a discussion item, not yet as a
That's what I'm
written
thinking. Bring
ordinance.
it back as a discussion item on boards and commissions.
Okay.
And then I'll just mention, since council's talking about this a little bit, generally, I mean, ideally, the mayor would have monthly meetings of boards and commissions. I think this last year it's been maybe twice. I did, in this process of talking to boards and commissions and staff, city department heads that are staff for these boards and commissions, about having that in January on the 3rd Thursday. So try to remember to notice council in case. It's a great way for the boards and commission chairs to talk to each other and see what each other's working on, and to bring things up like an aircraft museum so that it's kind of on our radar. Other pending agenda items? Okay. As Councilman Allison mentioned, we do still have a vacancy on P&Z, so try to encourage participation there. And that's an important commission. And then we do have elections sneaking up on the horizon. Okay, not hearing anything else there. We have the call-in number again for the public for audience comments is 424-6248. That's 424-6248. And while we're watching those phones, I think we can start on council comments. Let me just go in order here.
So this is Barb Jewell. I'm calling in with an audience comment, if I may.
Yes, please. Audience participation.
So I just wanted to say a couple of things. So one is I'm really grateful for the deep and thoughtful conversations that happened tonight. I am grateful for all of the things the council has done over the last 9 months to keep the community safe, to allocate resources, to keep the city running, and to make these hard decisions that you have had to make. And I can imagine, even though I'm not there, that you're all pretty exhausted. So thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate that you're going to take another look at this. I agree with several of the comments that this budget is missing several things. And that acknowledgement and the agreement to keep looking forward, I think, is very responsible and very thoughtful. I will also offer that certainly come May, you will be hearing from the school board, because the money currently allocated probably does not meet our needs. But I appreciate the acknowledgement that that may be the case and the willingness to take a look at that in the future. I also want to speak to the request for comments about masks. I deeply appreciate the ordinance about masks. I actually wish that it were enforced more fully or followed more fully, because I do think that every masks protects us from COVID until we can all have access to the vaccine. So I wanted to offer that feedback in response to the question. Again, I really appreciate the deep and thoughtful conversation tonight, and I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you, Barb. I just want to mention to council, and because there was a nuance to what Bitney said in his report, and I want to make sure we don't miss it. The governor has set the bottom rail for the bond debt reimbursement. The legislature keeps setting the top rail for it. So when the governor comes in at 50%, the legislature, if they do anything, is going to come in with a higher number based on, what's happened in the past, and the governor can veto that. It's unlikely he's going to veto it to a lower number than he himself proposed. So to summarize that, it's more likely that that number is bigger than we expect than for it to be smaller. I just want to make sure we caught that. So, because that's kind of that's good news. Is there any other public comment? Yes, audience comments.
Last time.
We heard that.
It's all right. We've got 15 minutes.
So, and I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to really, crunch the numbers and look at all the different options and get creative. That's what Cordova does for anything. I'm glad we got the person in place, got him hired and soon, and you get your people in place and let your committee do its work. That could change the view of the committee if you've got people in place that are doing the things they want. I encourage ride-alongs from the folks on the committee. See what these guys do on a day-to-day. It's been a strange year for all of us. I was supposed to retire back end of March or April, I guess, and the manager and Paul Trumbley came and asked me to stick around and help out with the incident management team, because I've been teaching it for years, and this was a strange beast because we couldn't have our individual meetings and all the things we practiced. We had to adjust and modify everything to make it work. So we did it, and you all, every one of you that was involved in any way, shape, or form did a great job. Once again, we're the poster children for disaster management. It goes back to Joni Behrens and Mr. Groff and all the people that came before me that taught me. Once again, it was really a good job, and it was a community effort. You really have to support your people. I've always led that way, and I always will. You have to support your people. If you support your people, they'll support the mission, and they'll support the public, and they'll support you. So it's a two-way street. So again, I won't drag it out any longer, but thank you all very much, and I was happy that I got to help out in some way, shape, or form. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep, thank you, Mike.
Oh, good.
We have audience comments online, and then back to the room here. Yep.
Let me.
That's a lot of buttons.
Did we lose him, Harmony?
No, just thought I could do something that I can't. Kelsey? Yeah. Give me 1 second.
Good volume.
Okay, go ahead.
This is Kelsey Hayden. Thank you all so much for your hard work and time. Thank you, David Allison, for your time and creative way of balancing a budget with no permanent fund draws. I agree with Councilman Sherman's and other comments on taking a look at all departments and going forward. I firmly believe that should be a very strategic look with an independent individual collecting data and compiling it. Like Agnew Beck, we have a great working relationship with them. They put together a great strategic plan for us. I think you guys could use the same thing for all the departments. So we have a question of why do we need 4 officers? We have a document with data and goals that we can reflect on. Clearly that takes money that we don't have, but we did spend $2,500 on a police survey and hope to have some meetings. If we're going to do that on each department, I think it should be transparent and community involved strategic plan. So again, thank you all very much for your time and efforts. More than you could know, the decisions you made tonight impact my family on a daily basis in a very positive way. Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Audience comments here, and then we'll go to the phone again.
Alex Rustin, Superintendent. So managing an organization or an operation or a city is a very stressful position to be put in. And sometimes when working interagency wise, sometimes we don't see things eye to eye or we're not on the same page about things, but I'm real hopeful in working with city administration as the new year gets underway to really be on the same page and to be supportive of each other. Budgets, of course, are oftentimes filled with emotional discussions, emotional decisions, and I think that's a good thing because it indicates that that people care and it's important stuff. And nobody wants to have to cut a line item or see a staff member go. And I really appreciate council's deep dive and questions around putting forth a budget. I guess my last comment would be that I would just offer that I was reading some archives and some school district notes back to 2012 a little while ago, and I saw that there was a city ordinance that was proposed. I don't think it actually ever got approved, but it was 336-100, I think was the number that it was given at the time. But at any rate, it talked about the city council and the school board meeting twice a year to really sit down in a formal way and talk about capital improvement needs, budgets, finances, and other needs that the district may in fact have. I would really, really encourage city council to look at that ordinance. I have a copy of it. It's a draft. I don't think it was ever approved, like I said, but I think as the new year is upon us, there's an opportunity for new relations, new ideas, new ways to move forward. And I would really hope that council takes a look at that and codifies an important relationship between the district and the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you and the school board for your leadership as well, and having, as you mentioned, the consistency in the schools and classroom time, just another place of leadership. So we have another audience comment online.
Hi, you're online.
You're on the line now, caller. Audience comment.
Hey, Pam. James Burton. Just wanted to say thank you for your work. I know that these are some of the harder things to deal with on city council, and I appreciate it. I wholeheartedly agree with the budget amendments and the way it was passed tonight, and Merry Christmas to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Audience comment here in the building.
Evening, Cameron Hayden again. I just wanted to thank you guys. Earlier we had comments from an outside agency saying that, Cordova is always moving forward with a solution, right? And I think that's because we know that if we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem. You guys are our elected leaders here in Cordova. And as leaders, you have to look at the data. But good leaders also listen to the people they have on the ground. And you've done that. You've remained objective. You've looked at both sides of this coin, although it, difficult. And it's appreciated more than you know, okay? That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cam.
Thanks, Cam.
Did we have another call online? Okay, I'll go to council comments. Councilman Gleason.
Thanks to staff and thanks to Helen. She's in the worst seat at the table. And thanks to Dave Allison. This would have been a lot longer meeting if he didn't come up with the amendment right out of the gate there. So, yeah, and that's it.
Councilman Schaefer.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you to Helen for getting us through this process. We did pass a balanced budget, but as others have stated before during the meeting, this will not be our last conversation about our 2021 budget. We'll reevaluate and revisit beginning of next year. There are a lot of holes still left to look at. Thanks to everyone who stepped up to serve on the boards and commissions. Thank you to Cindy for all your years of service to the city, and congrats on retirement. And yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. onward to a better 2021.
Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, I'd echo that. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and that was a kind of an interesting point the gentleman made, that he's been working night shift and doesn't get out to see people. That's kind of sad. Brought it home because just yesterday and actually today, the state trooper stopped by. He saw me working on a project, was interested in some stuff, introduced himself, and I thought, that's exactly what you need. Now I know who that gentleman is. You know, I mean, we've kind of connected there. So that's a good point. I don't know what's driving the resistance to this fourth officer. I get the sense it's not $120,000. I hope I'm wrong on that. But the research that I was able to do, the people I was able to talk to, there's no question in my mind that we cannot operate this police force without the 4 officers and the chief. So I totally support that. And thanks for everybody for their hard work. And thanks, Dave, especially for coming up with some good solutions.
Councilman Sherman.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to ask, because I know there's a deadline of tonight, are we going to follow up with a message to the think tank or to the comment period for EVO?
Yes.
We have an hour. Okay.
Got an hour.
Wanted to thank Helen and everybody on staff for presenting a pretty strong budget. I know it was a really difficult one, and I can still remember, Helen, when you started, we were like, yeah, 6 months, we'll have this down, and then comes a pandemic, so sorry. I want to thank Councilman Ellison for doing really good math and presenting us with some possible solutions. I'd like to keep continuing discussion because I would like to see how we can make all these positions that we've eliminated, the Parks and Rec, the police officer, which we found a reason for, human resources are still to fill, and there could be more coming up. So we have to become sustainable, and that's where I'm really advocating that we go through each one of these budgets or of each department and talk about it in a reasonable way. And I think we did a really good job tonight talking pretty reasonably. And it's about all I have. I just hope everyone has a nice holiday. And as someone who recently lost her father to COVID, I am going to wear my mask until Dr. Fauci tells me to take it off. Be safe. Happy holidays.
Councilman Gard.
Yeah, thanks to staff for all the hard work they put in on getting this budget out there for us so we can get it done. My reluctance to fund the 4th officer wasn't an argument against police or against policing. This being the 4th budget I've gone through this time, our financial holes seem to get deeper and deeper every year. And we need to do some kind of systematic assessment to see what our real needs for each of the services we get and supply as a city are, and how best we can do those so we can keep Cordova as healthy and happy as we can. And that was my only reluctance in this. Anyway, but that's all water under the bridge. I'm happy we got it all done. And Happy New Year, and everybody have a Merry Christmas. I'm out.
Councilman Allison.
Yeah, thanks everybody that participated, the written comments and those that commented here this evening. I appreciate all the comment, and as Councilmember Sherman said before, it was, I think we all read those messages and take them to heart, so appreciate all of that. I'd like to thank the staff and Helen and Ken in particular for the work that they did on the budget. Again, you know, comments have been made before, but the department heads and the department people and everybody who worked on that budget, appreciate it, and just think positive on those revenues, and hopefully we'll get there. Hopefully that means that with this budget, we'll unfreeze that 4th officer position and get somebody on the hook here as soon as we can. And wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
And final word, Councilman Meyer.
Yeah, thank you. Long evening, everybody. Glad we got a budget passed. And I am happy that the 4th position, the police officer, is being filled. I don't want to kind of muddy the waters or make it sound like that it's all about money. I worry about the sustainability of our budget going into the future. And I think the saving grace of tonight was really the school bond reimbursement. That's still not a guarantee. I think that we have very good chances of it, and I feel very confident in putting it in the budget tonight. So, it was a long night. I feel good at the end of the night, and I think we passed a decent budget, but a budget that does need to be looked at. I think I'm not 100% there on our budget yet, and we passed it, and that's not a good feeling, but 2020, 2021 kind of does that to all of us in the world. So thanks, everybody, and Happy New Year, and see you guys when I see you.
Okay, thank you. Any objection to adjourning? Good, because we're adjourned by code.
Just as a point of order, it doesn't say adjourned by code at 11. It says we can't do business past 11. So comments are fine past 11.
Okay, good.
Doesn't say we got to go